Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Ethan Reeves guided his beat-up pickup into the driveway of his modest suburban home, a rare smile playing on his oil-stained face. The skilled diesel mechanic had managed to wrangle an early release from Big Rig Revival, determined to surprise his wife Olivia on Valentine's Day. He killed the engine, grabbed a small bouquet of carnations from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the crisp February air. As he approached the house, an unfamiliar sound stopped him in his tracks. Laughter, deep and masculine, mingled with the melodic tones of Olivia's voice. Ethan's brow furrowed. They weren't expecting company, were they? He hesitated at the front door, key in hand. Something fell off. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, just like they did when he sensed a problem with an engine that wasn't immediately apparent. Shaking off the feeling, Ethan turned the key and stepped inside. The laughter grew louder, emanating from the living room. He rounded the corner and froze. Olivia, his wife of 12 years, was wrapped in the arms of a man Ethan had never seen before. The stranger was tall, clean-cut, and wearing an expensive-looking suit that made Ethan acutely aware of the grease stains on his own work clothes. In the man's free hand was an extravagant bouquet of exotic flowers that made Ethan's carnations look like weeds. The couple broke apart at Ethan's entrance, but the stranger didn't let go of Olivia. Instead, he fixed Ethan with a confident smirk and said, "You must be the husband. I'm Dr. Cameron Vance." Ethan's mind reeled. Dr. Vance. The name was vaguely familiar. The new pediatrician at Olivia's hospital. He'd heard her mention him in passing, but never like this. Before Ethan could form a response, Cameron turned back to Olivia. He presented her with the elaborate bouquet and planted a passionate kiss on her lips. "Pack your bags, darling," he declared. "It's time to leave this dead-end life behind." Ethan felt like he'd been sucker-punched. He looked to Olivia, waiting for her to deny it, to push this arrogant doctor away. But she didn't. Instead, she met Ethan's gaze head-on, her blue eyes devoid of the warmth they once held for him. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "Cameron and I, we've been seeing each other for 3 years now, since he started at the hospital." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. 3 years, half of their marriage, tainted by lies. In a moment of shocked anger, Ethan found his voice. "If you walk out that door with him, Olivia, we're done. 12 years of marriage gone. There's no coming back from this." Olivia hesitated, her eyes flickering between Ethan and Cameron. For a brief moment, Ethan thought she might reconsider. But then she squared her shoulders, grabbed her purse, and walked towards the door. "I'll be back for my things," she said, not meeting Ethan's eyes. And just like that, she was gone, leaving Ethan standing alone in their once shared home, a bouquet of wilting carnations clutched in his trembling hand. The weeks following Olivia's departure blurred together for Ethan. He moved through his days in a haze of anger and depression, barely registering the world around him. His work at Big Rig Revival suffered as a result. One particularly bad day, after Ethan had botched a simple oil change, his boss Gina Ortiz pulled him aside. Her usually stern face was etched with concern. "Ethan, what's going on with you?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "You've been off your game for weeks now. I hate to do this, but I've got to give you an ultimatum. You've got 4 weeks to get your act together, or I'll have to let you go. We can't afford mistakes in this business." Ethan nodded numbly, knowing he should feel more concerned about potentially losing his job. But the threat of unemployment felt distant compared to the constant ache in his chest. That evening, hoping to drown his sorrows in a greasy burger, Ethan found himself at the local diner. As he waited for his order, he overheard a snippet of conversation from the booth behind him. "Can you believe Olivia finally left that grease monkey husband of hers? About time, if you ask me. She and Dr. Vance have been the worst-kept secret at the hospital for years." Ethan's hand clenched around his water glass. The worst-kept secret. Everyone had known except him. He'd been the town fool, oblivious to his wife's infidelity, while the rest of their social circle whispered and laughed behind his back. Abandoning his uneaten meal, Ethan drove to the bank, a new thought nagging at him. When he checked their joint account, his suspicions were confirmed. The $50,000 they'd painstakingly saved over the years gone, withdrawn by Olivia the day after she'd left. Financially strained and emotionally drained, Ethan found himself on the doorstep of his childhood friend, Ray Daniels. Ray, now a therapist, listened patiently as Ethan poured out his story. "I know it hurts, man," Ray said when Ethan finished, "but you've got to move on. Olivia made her choice. Don't let her destroy you." But even as Ethan nodded in agreement, he felt something shift inside him. The pain that had been consuming him began to harden, transforming into a thirst for retribution. Olivia and Cameron had humiliated him, betrayed him, stolen from him. They couldn't be allowed to get away with it. As Ethan left Ray's office, his mind was already working, plotting how he could make them pay. Weeks passed, and Ethan found himself working late at Big Rig Revival, trying to make up for his earlier mistakes and keep his job. As he tinkered with a particularly stubborn engine, he overheard two truckers talking in low voices near the office. "Heard the road reapers are having trouble with their runs." One of them was saying, "Increased police patrols are making it hard for them to move their stuff across state lines." Ethan's ears perked up. He'd heard of the road reapers before, a notorious biker gang known for trafficking illegal substances. Not the kind of crowd he'd ever associated with before. The other trucker snorted. "Serves them right, but they'll find a way around it. They always do." As the truckers moved away, Ethan's mind raced. An idea was forming, a dangerous, reckless idea that went against everything he'd ever believed in. But the thought of Olivia and Cameron, living it up with his hard-earned money while he struggled to keep his job, made his blood boil. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was illegal. But the desire for revenge overwhelmed his better judgment. Over the next few days, Ethan did his research. He learned everything he could about the road reapers, their operations, and their vehicles. Then, steeling his nerves, he made his way to a seedy bar on the outskirts of town, known to be a hangout for the gang. The bar was dimly lit and smelled of stale beer and cigarettes. Ethan felt woefully out of place in his work jeans and flannel shirt, surrounded by leather-clad bikers. But he spotted his target, Axel Krieger, the road reapers' leader, at a corner table and approached with feigned confidence. "Axel Krieger?" Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've got a proposition for you." Axel, a mountain of a man with a bushy beard and arms covered in tattoos, looked up at Ethan with amusement. "And who might you be, little man?" Ethan swallowed hard but pressed on. "I'm a mechanic, a damn good one. I heard you've been having trouble with your transportation. I can help. I can modify your bikes, make them faster, stealthier, add hidden compartments that no cop would ever find." Axel's eyes narrowed. "And why would a straight-laced mechanic want to get mixed up with us?" "Let's just say I've got my reasons," Ethan replied, thinking of Olivia and Cameron. "You don't need to know them. All you need to know is that I can help you stay ahead of the law." Axel studied Ethan for a long moment, then barked out a laugh. "You've got balls. I'll give you that. All right, we'll give you a trial run. One bike. If you can do what you say, maybe we'll talk more." Ethan nodded, relief and trepidation warring inside him. As he left the bar, he realized he'd just taken his first step down a very dark path. But the thought of Olivia and Cameron's shocked faces when their perfect new life came crashing down around them steeled his resolve. He'd show them what happened when you betrayed Ethan Reeves, and the road reapers were going to help him do it. Ethan Reeves sat in the dim light of his basement, the glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he contemplated his next move. The past few weeks working with the road reapers had given him access to resources he'd never imagined. Now, it was time to put them to use. He opened a new email account, one that couldn't be traced back to him. The message he composed was brief but damning. To the hospital board, I am writing to express grave concerns about the professional conduct of Dr. Cameron Vance and Nurse Olivia Reeves. Their inappropriate relationship has become a liability to patient care. Ethan's finger lingered over the send button. A small voice in the back of his mind whispered that this was wrong, that he was crossing a line. But then he remembered Olivia's cold eyes as she walked out on their marriage, and Cameron's smug smile. His jaw clenched, and he hit send. But that was just the beginning. Ethan knew that to truly devastate them professionally, he needed more. His time with the Road Reapers had taught him that everyone had secrets, and those secrets could be weaponized. Using the skills he'd picked up from the gang's tech guy, Ethan managed to access the hospital's pharmacy records. It took him hours of painstaking work, but eventually he was able to manipulate the data. To anyone looking closely, it would appear that Olivia had been falsifying prescriptions for painkillers. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but think about how Olivia had always been so proud of her nursing career. She'd worked hard to get where she was, putting herself through school while he worked extra shifts at the garage to make ends meet. Now, he was systematically destroying everything she'd built. The thought should have made him feel guilty, but all he felt was a cold satisfaction. The final piece of his plan required a bit more hands-on involvement. Ethan reached out to his contact in the Road Reapers, a wiry man named Spike who always seemed to be vibrating with nervous energy. I need something, Ethan said when they met in a deserted parking lot. Just a small amount, enough to ruin someone. Spike eyed him warily. This ain't for personal use, is it? 'Cause Axel won't like that. Ethan shook his head. It's for a job. That's all you need to know. Spike hesitated, then shrugged. He pulled out a small baggie filled with white powder. Your funeral, man. With the final piece in place, Ethan put his plan into motion. He knew Cameron's schedule, knew when he'd be at the hospital. It was almost too easy to plant the drugs in the doctor's car. Then came another anonymous tip, this time to the police. There's a doctor at Memorial Hospital dealing drugs from his car. His name is Cameron Vance. Ethan watched from across the street as the police pulled Cameron over on his way home from work. He saw the confusion on Cameron's face turn to shock as the officers found the planted drugs. As they cuffed him and put him in the back of the patrol car, Ethan felt a surge of triumph. The next day, the hospital was in chaos. Both Olivia and Cameron had been suspended pending investigation. Rumors flew about drug dealing and falsified prescriptions. Ethan observed it all from a distance, his face a mask of concerned confusion whenever anyone at Big Rig Revival mentioned the scandal. As he drove home that evening, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 of his revenge was complete, but he was far from done. Ethan knew that to truly destroy Olivia and Cameron, he needed to hit them where it would hurt the most, their wallets. But for this, he needed help beyond what the Road Reapers could provide. Through his connections with the gang, Ethan was put in touch with a hacker known only as Ghost. They met in a nondescript coffee shop, Ghost's face hidden behind the glow of a laptop screen. I need access to some email accounts and financial records, Ethan said, sliding a piece of paper across the table with Olivia and Cameron's information. Ghost raised an eyebrow. That's some personal stuff you're after. Sure you want to go down this road? Ethan's face hardened. They went down this road when they decided to destroy my life. I'm just returning the favor. Ghost shrugged and got to work. Within hours, Ethan had full access to Olivia and Cameron's email accounts and financial records. What he saw made his blood boil. They had been planning their new life together for months, discussing investments and future plans with his money. With Ghost's help, Ethan began to systematically dismantle their financial lives. He emptied their personal accounts and investment portfolios, carefully making the transactions appear as if Olivia and Cameron were involved in a complex money laundering scheme. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but think about the life he and Olivia had planned together. They were supposed to grow old in that modest suburban house, maybe have a couple of kids. Now, he was ensuring they wouldn't even be able to rent a decent apartment. Next came their credit histories. Ghost showed Ethan how to manipulate the data, tanking their credit scores to the point where they wouldn't be able to get a loan for a candy bar, let alone a house or car. The final touch was an anonymous report to the IRS, complete with falsified evidence of hidden income. Ethan knew from his own tax troubles years ago how ruthless the IRS could be. He almost felt sorry for what was coming their way. Almost. As the days passed, Ethan watched from afar as Olivia and Cameron's world crumbled around them. He saw them arguing outside the hospital, saw the stress and fear etched on their faces as they were turned away from banks and real estate offices. One evening, as Ethan was leaving Big Rig Revival, he overheard two nurses gossiping by their cars. "Did you hear about Olivia and that doctor she ran off with?" One said. "Apparently, they're under investigation for money laundering or something. All their accounts are frozen." "Serves them right," the other replied. "Karma's a bitch." Ethan allowed himself a small smirk as he got into his truck. Karma indeed. Ethan was elbow deep in the engine of a semi when he heard the commotion. Angry voices echoed through the garage, growing louder as they approached. He recognized them immediately and felt a mix of anticipation and dread coil in his stomach. "Where is he?" Cameron's voice boomed. "Where's that bastard Ethan?" Ethan slowly extracted himself from the engine, wiping his hands on a rag as he turned to face the approaching storm. Olivia and Cameron stood before him, their once polished appearances now ragged and desperate. Olivia's eyes, once cold when she left him, now burned with a mixture of anger and pleading. "Ethan, what have you done?" Ethan kept his face carefully neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia. I've been here, doing my job." Cameron surged forward, his face red with rage. "Don't play dumb, you grease monkey. Our lives are in ruins, and I know you're behind it somehow." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his voice calm despite the hammering of his heart. "Sounds like you've had a rough time, but I fail to see how that's my problem. You made your choices." "Choices?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Ethan, we're being investigated by the IRS. The hospital board is talking about revoking our licenses. We can't even get a credit card. This goes way beyond our mistake." Ethan felt a flicker of satisfaction at her use of the word mistake, but he squashed it down. "That sounds awful," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But again, I don't see what it has to do with me. I'm just a mechanic, remember?" Cameron's control snapped. With a roar of frustration, he lunged at Ethan, grabbing him by the front of his coveralls. "You smug son of a—" But before he could finish, a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan looked over Cameron's shoulder to see Axel and two other road reapers standing at the entrance to the garage. They must have come for their weekly vehicle checkup. Cameron, oblivious to the danger, sneered at the newcomers. "This doesn't concern you. This is between me and this lying piece of—" Axel stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing Cameron. "I think you'll find it does concern us. Ethan here is under our protection, so I suggest you take your hands off him. Now." The color drained from Cameron's face as he realized the situation he was in. He released Ethan and stepped back, pulling Olivia behind him protectively. The tense standoff was broken by the sudden wail of police sirens. Ethan's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He hadn't planned this. Gina's voice called out from the office. "I hit the silent alarm when I saw the confrontation. The police are on their way." Panic flashed across Cameron's face. Ethan watched as he surreptitiously reached into his pocket, presumably to dispose of any remaining evidence from his arrest. But he wasn't fast enough. Two police officers burst into the garage, hands on their weapons. "What's going on here?" One of the officers recognized Cameron. "Dr. Vance? Didn't we just arrest you last week?" Before Cameron could respond, the officer noticed his suspicious movement. "Sir, please remove your hand from your pocket slowly." Cameron complied, his face ashen. The officer approached and reached into Cameron's pocket, pulling out a small bag with trace amounts of white powder. "Well, well, the officer said, his voice hard. "Looks like we've got ourselves a repeat offender." As the officers cuffed Cameron and read him his rights, Ethan caught Olivia's eye. The look she gave him was one of dawning realization and horror. She knew. She finally understood the extent of what he'd done. Ethan maintained his innocent facade, but inside, he felt a rush of dark triumph. As Cameron was led away and Olivia stood alone, her world crumbling around her, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The Road Reapers melted away as the police took statements, leaving Ethan to spin a tale of being unfairly confronted by his ex-wife and her unstable boyfriend. Gina backed up his story, and soon, the garage was quiet once more. As Ethan returned to the engine he'd been working on, he realized that his revenge was complete. Olivia and Cameron's professional lives were in shambles. Their finances were ruined, and now Cameron was facing serious criminal charges. But as the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, Ethan felt an unexpected emptiness. He picked up his wrench and dove back into his work. He couldn't shake the feeling that this victory might be more dangerous than he'd anticipated. Ethan Reeves stepped out of his apartment building. The cool morning air a welcome respite from the stuffy interior. He'd been lying low since the confrontation at Big Rig Revival, taking some time off work to avoid suspicion. As he walked to his truck, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The street was quiet, too quiet for a weekday morning. Ethan's eyes darted from side to side, his newfound paranoia making every shadow seem threatening. He was reaching for his truck door when he heard it, the low rumble of motorcycles approaching fast. Ethan's heart rate spiked. This wasn't the familiar sound of the Road Reapers' bikes. These engines were different, angrier somehow. He turned just in time to see a group of motorcycles round the corner, their riders clad in leather jackets emblazoned with a coiled viper. The Steel Vipers. Ethan had heard whispers about them from the Road Reapers. They were rivals, constantly fighting over territory and drug routes. But what were they doing here? Ethan didn't have time to ponder the question. The lead rider raised his arm, and Ethan caught the glint of sunlight on metal. His body reacted before his mind could process what was happening. He dove behind his truck just as the first shots rang out. The sound of gunfire filled the air, accompanied by the shattering of glass and the ping of bullets hitting metal. Ethan's truck rocked with the impact of multiple rounds. He curled into a ball, hands over his head, praying for it to end. As quickly as it had started, the attack was over. The roar of motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving behind a ringing silence punctuated by car alarms and distant screams. Ethan cautiously raised his head. His truck was riddled with bullet holes, the windows shattered. Across the street, he saw his neighbors peeking out from behind curtains, their faces pale with shock. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed 911. As he waited for the operator to pick up, the reality of what had just happened hit him like a physical blow. The Steel Vipers had targeted him. They must believe he was a key player in the Road Reapers operation. His revenge plot against Olivia and Cameron had spiraled far beyond his control. He was no longer just playing at being a criminal. He was in the middle of a gang war, and he had just become a primary target. As sirens wailed in the distance, Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't go to the police. That would mean admitting to his involvement with the Road Reapers. But he couldn't just sit back and wait for the next attack either. He needed a plan, a way to extricate himself from this mess before it got him killed. As he gave his statement to the responding officers, carefully omitting any mention of his connection to the Road Reapers, an idea began to form. If he was caught in the middle of a gang war, maybe he could use that to his advantage, play both sides against each other, and come out clean on the other side. It was risky, potentially suicidal even. But as Ethan looked at the bullet-riddled remains of his truck, he realized he was out of options. He was going to have to outsmart two of the most dangerous gangs in the state, and he was going to have to do it fast. Ethan sat in a dingy motel room, his laptop open before him. He'd been here for days, using the skills he'd picked up from Ghost to create a web of false information. It was time to set his plan in motion. First, He fabricated evidence suggesting that the Road Reapers were planning to hijack the Steel Viper's next major shipment. He planted this information in places he knew the Vipers would find it: encrypted messages on dark web forums, whispers in the right ears at seedy bars. Then he did the same for the Road Reapers, creating a mirror image of the plot, but with the Vipers as the would-be hijackers. He made sure to use different methods, different styles of communication. It had to look like two separate plans, not one person playing puppet master. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come. From a simple mechanic to a man orchestrating a showdown between two notorious gangs. He wondered what Olivia would think if she could see him now. Would she be impressed, horrified, or would she just see the same grease monkey she'd left behind? With the bait set, Ethan moved on to the next phase of his plan. He created an anonymous email account and composed a message to both gangs. A major shipment of product is coming through your territory next week. Details enclosed. This is your chance to take out your rivals once and for all. He attached the fabricated details of the fictional shipment, making sure the information was vague enough to be believable but specific enough to ensure both gangs would converge at the same place and time. Ethan's finger hovered over the send button. Once he did this, there would be no going back. He thought about Olivia, about Cameron, about how this had all started with a simple desire for revenge. Now, he was about to potentially cause a bloodbath. But then he remembered the drive-by shooting, the terror he'd felt as bullets whizzed past his head. It was them or him now. He hit send. With the gangs primed for conflict, Ethan turned his attention to law enforcement. He couldn't go to the local police. Too risky. But he knew from his time with the Road Reapers that there was a DEA task force in the area, one that had been trying to bring down both gangs for years. Using another anonymous email account, Ethan reached out to the DEA. He provided detailed information about both gangs' operations, information he'd gleaned during his time with the Road Reapers and through his own investigations. And most importantly, he gave him the time and location of the impending gang confrontation. As he sent the final email, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd done all he could. Now, he just had to wait and hope his plan worked. The night of the supposed shipment arrived. Ethan watched from a safe distance as vehicles belonging to both gangs converged on the abandoned warehouse he'd specified in his tips. He could see the tension in the air, the way both sides moved with wary aggression. Just as the first shots were fired, a fleet of unmarked vehicles swarmed the area. DEA agents poured out, weapons drawn. The resulting chaos was beyond anything Ethan had imagined. Gunfire erupted from all sides as gang members tried to flee or fight back. Ethan watched, his heart pounding, as dozens of gang members were arrested. He recognized Axel among those being led away in handcuffs. The man who had once terrified him now looked small and defeated. As the dust settled, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. His plan had worked. Both the Road Reapers and the Steel Vipers had been effectively dismantled in one fell swoop. His connection to the underworld was severed. But as he turned to leave, Ethan realized something that wiped the smile from his face. Yes, he was free from the gang's influence, but he was also without their protection, and he had just made a lot of dangerous enemies. The weeks following the gang bust were tense for Ethan. He half expected the police to show up at his door at any moment, to reveal that they'd discovered his role in the whole affair. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, he began to relax. It was a crisp fall morning when there was finally a knock at his door. Ethan's heart leaped into his throat, but when he opened it, he found not the police, but a pair of DEA agents. "Mr. Reeves," one of them said, "we'd like to ask you a few questions about the recent gang activity in the area." Ethan's palms began to sweat, but he nodded and invited them in. For the next hour, he answered their questions as vaguely as possible, sticking to half-truths and carefully constructed lies. To his surprise, the agent seemed less interested in interrogating him and more in thanking him. "Mr. Reeves," the lead agent said as they were preparing to leave, We want you to know that the information you provided was instrumental in bringing down two of the most dangerous gangs in the state. Ethan blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what information? The agent smiled knowingly. Come now, Mr. Reeves. We're well aware that you were the anonymous tipster who led us to the warehouse that night. Your detailed knowledge of both gangs' operations was invaluable. Ethan's mind raced. They thought he was some kind of upstanding citizen informant, not a man out for revenge who had gotten in way over his head. We'd like to offer you a commendation for your service, the agent continued. It'll be private, of course. We understand the need for discretion in these matters. As the agents left, Ethan stood in his doorway, stunned. He had gone from a man on the verge of losing everything to a celebrated informant in the eyes of law enforcement. The irony was almost too much to bear. Weeks passed, and life began to return to normal. Ethan went back to work at Big Rig Revival. His newfound status as a community hero, the story had leaked, despite the DA's promises of discretion, earning him a promotion from Gina. It was on a quiet Sunday afternoon that Ethan's past came knocking once again. He opened his door to find Olivia standing there, looking pale and drawn. Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? He let her in, more out of shock than any desire to hear what she had to say. Olivia sat on his couch, wringing her hands. I've made a terrible mistake, Ethan, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Cameron, he's in prison. Our lives are ruined. I see now how foolish I was to throw away what we had. Ethan listened silently as Olivia poured out her heart, begging for forgiveness, asking for another chance. A part of him, the part that still remembered the happy years of their marriage, wanted to take her in his arms and tell her all was forgiven. But as he looked at her, all he could see was a woman who had walked out on him, who had drained their savings and left him with nothing but a thirst for revenge that had nearly gotten him killed. I'm sorry, Olivia, he said, his voice gentle but firm, but that chapter of our lives is over. I've moved on. I think you should too. The look of devastation on Olivia's face as she left was something Ethan knew would stay with him for a long time. But as he closed the door behind her, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in months. With his newfound reputation and the modest reward money from the DEA, Ethan was able to secure a loan to start his own business. He called it Reeves Custom Rigs, a specialty truck modification shop that would allow him to put his skills to use on his own terms. On the day of the grand opening, Ethan stood outside his new shop, surrounded by friends and well-wishers. Gina was there, beaming with pride at her former employee. Even Ray had shown up, clearly relieved to see Ethan looking happy and healthy. As he cut the ribbon to officially open Reeves Custom Rigs, Ethan felt a sense of optimism he hadn't experienced in years. He had walked through fire, made mistakes, and nearly lost everything. But he had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and ready for a fresh start. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan Reeves was looking forward to the journey. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
My mom died about 5 months ago. I got what was in her bank account when the inheritance was settled. It was approximately $250. My sister and her 4 kids got my mom's house and everything in it. Mom's remaining 401k went to my sister also. My sister lives with my mom. She doesn't speak to the 3 different men who fathered her children. Since this happened, I cut off my sister, who I'd always had a rocky relationship with, since she always used her kids to manipulate my mother. My sister called me and wanted my information, like my social security number, so she can put me as the beneficiary in her will, and for me if something happens to her. I said no. I enjoy my child-free life, and I don't want her kids if something happens to her. She said I was the only family she had left. I told her I didn't care. You're not using your children to manipulate me like you did to our mom. My sister yelled at me, asking what would happen to her kids if she died. I told her I guess they could live with their fathers or go into foster care. Either way, it's not my problem. I've already put distance between my sister and her kids. I'm not planning to stay in contact with her at all. And this was the first time we've spoken since the will. Am I the idiot for not wanting to take care of my sister's kids if something happens to her? She's literally having no one else because she's pushed the entire family away from her, including me. So that's why it might be mean. She was a former addict and stole from my aunt. She's cut from our cousins for various other reasons. She was a former addict and stole from my aunt. Are you 100% sure she wants your social security number and other info for beneficiary paperwork? You are not it. You don't want her anywhere near your personal information. Do not give her your social security number. It is not needed. A will just needs the name of the person who will get responsibility of your children if the worst should happen. That's what I was going to say. You don't need a social security number to add someone as a beneficiary to anything in a will. Scam alert. And FYI, OP, even if she did put in her will that she wants her children to go to you, that doesn't mean you're legally obligated to take them, especially since they have living fathers who can and should step up. Your sister wanted your social security number for nefarious purposes. You were right to cut her off. Just be prepared. There's a solid chance that she's actively using again if she's looking at identity theft right now, and you could still get called to take the kids by CPS. It would be worth having contact information for the fathers to give to the CPS workers. Why did she inherit almost all your mother's assets, while you inherited a mere $250? Did she manipulate your mom to leave her the house and the 401k? Unless you and your mom had a bad relationship, leaving you only a nearly empty bank account is BS. Contact a lawyer and see if your mom had other policies that named you as the beneficiary. Also, contact the bank to see if mom's account was emptied by anyone else shortly after her passing. Something sounds sussy here. My wife and I, 48 male, have a son, John, 26, who recently told us that he's asking his girlfriend, Cece, to marry him. We've met Cece a few times before, and she seems like a nice girl, but we have concerns about Cece's family. My wife and I own a few rental properties, and John stays in one of the properties rent-free, as he's still in grad school. My wife and I have always agreed to provide free housing for all our kids, especially while they're in school, so that they don't have to worry about rent in a high cost of living area. The concern with Cece's family comes from having met the family a couple of times before. They seem inappropriately interested in my wife and my finances, and Cece's mother, from what I've heard from my other kids, and a little from John, is close to retirement, has no savings or plans set up for retirement. Her mother has multiple times attempted to move in and live rent-free in one of my properties because, according to her, it's her future son-in-law's house. My take is that Cece's mother sees John, who's about to graduate from med school, as their retirement security. John's my oldest, and I've signed a will where he gets a large amount of cash, plus the property that Cece's mother was trying to move into. I'm not sure if the mother knows that, and that's why she was trying to move in, but John knows what he's inheriting. My biggest fear is that somehow that family will end up with a piece of the house, for whatever reason, once I pass. John has a pure heart and always sees the good in people, and I think his future mother-in-law will take advantage of that. When John told me he was getting married to Cece, I requested that he sign a prenup to protect his inheritance, and also, prenups are generally advisable, but he was vehemently against it. I told him that he'd be written out of the will, and the house would go to our other kids if he married her without a prenup, but it seemed like he was not budging. So I'd gone ahead and started plans to leave the house to my other kid. I have a good reason not to trust Cece's family and their intentions with my son. I'm not going to tell a grown man who he can and can't marry, but I want to protect what I'm leaving for my children. My son stopped talking to me, and I'm unsure if I was that unreasonable. Edit. We are primarily concerned about the house, My son will be still receiving the huge chunk of cash on the will. He'll be getting something, just not the house. When my wife and I met Cece's mother, she made multiple comments about how her future son-in-law has her retirement taken care of, and she's asked us multiple times if she could move into the house to the point where it was getting inappropriate. Okay, so I think you should trust your gut, and based on the example of the future mother-in-law already pushing to live rent-free in your property, I think you're onto something, and you are not the idiot. You could do a trust and have a trustee continue to exercise control after your death, or even in your will. You could have a prenup clause. My father did that, where anyone who wants to inherit must have a prenup. I think Cece's family will move in with John and his wife as soon as they're married. And if John and Cece are okay with that, it shouldn't be a problem. If John isn't okay with that and is pressured to do so by his not quite in-laws, then sure, it's an issue. But from the sound of things, John doesn't have an issue with his in-laws. I can see where OP is coming from, but I also think there's a certain level of manipulation and control at play when Dad is saying, if you don't do what I want, I'll write you out of the will. John isn't entitled to any sort of inheritance, but trying to use it as leverage to affect his decisions is manipulative at best. But it sounds like OP is footing John's bills at that property. Maybe I'm just making a wild assumption here, but if OP has housing costs taken care of to help the kids with their bills while in school, it would stand to reason that utilities are included. If I were OP, I wouldn't want to pay any bills as part of someone else's retirement. Trust your gut. Why should you have outsiders come in and take what you've worked for? Maybe you want to leave your son a bit of cash, but nothing major that the in-laws could benefit from. It would be interesting to see how things would turn out if the girlfriend's family knew that your son was getting nothing and would not be funding their retirement. My 27 female, cousin 23 female, was diagnosed with leukemia and is not doing well. I feel terrible for her, but I was never close to her growing up. We grew up in different countries. I'm getting married in spring. My aunt came over 2 weeks ago to discuss something. She wanted me to let my cousin walk down the aisle with her dad before I walk. I don't feel comfortable with it because it's sad that she won't get to experience this, but isn't it my day to shine? My aunt says that I'm being selfish for not doing this. She spoke to my parents about this, and they don't seem too happy. My in-laws are not pleased either, but they still want me to decide. My fiancé doesn't feel comfortable either. My aunt brought my cousin to my place to discuss it last week. Cousin cried, saying she wanted to walk down the aisle and that I should let her. I told her it was my wedding day, so it was unacceptable for her to take over. She then called me selfish and a bridezilla for not caring about her. We were never close, so I don't know why she's trying to do this on my wedding day. I told her I needed more time to think, so she's on Instagram posting cryptic stuff, obviously attacking me. I talked to my friends for non-biased opinions, and they were divided. Some want me to allow her to walk down the aisle because she would never experience that, and I'll be doing something nice. Am I the idiot if I say no? If she wants to walk down the aisle, why must it be at your wedding? Why can't your aunt plan a ceremony for your cousin? Not the idiot. It's an unreasonable request. You were right to turn it down. Also, I feel if you allowed her to do that, she'd show up in a wedding dress. Right? It's not her day. She doesn't get to be the center of attention. She doesn't get to do the things the bride does. And she doesn't get to try and guilt trip you for saying no. I'd be fully prepared for her to wear white to the wedding, or for her to try and spill something on your dress. Be sure to warn them that should they even attempt anything on your big day, they will be removed by force if necessary. If you think they would anyway, uninvite them, but be vocal about why. Does your cousin want to pretend she's the one marrying your fiancé? Does she want to borrow your groom too? She doesn't have a partner waiting for her at the ends of the aisle. And if she does want to pretend she's marrying your fiancé, that's an insane request. I'm just going to put this out there. It sounds like this is more for your aunt and not her sick daughter. Poor lady wants to see her child getting married on your dime. Last week marked the anniversary of my brother's wife's passing. Coincidentally, on the same day my daughter was born. My wife and I have been planning our first birthday party for weeks, and the entire family was looking forward to it, especially given that she's the first grandchild and niece. Understanding the significance of the day for my brother, I checked in with him beforehand. He mentioned not planning anything special to honor his late wife, expressing concern about stealing the spotlight from my daughter's celebration. I reassured him that it was important for him to commemorate his feelings on this significant day. He chose not to attend and attended my daughter's party instead. Fast forward to the day of the party. The family was busy setting up, and my brother started silently crying, the intensity of which seemed to increase progressively. When my sister asked him what was wrong, he shared that seeing everyone celebrate on a day that held personal sadness for him was difficult. We all tried our best to comfort him. As the party went on, my brother's mood didn't change. Multiple times he managed to bring up his late wife's passing to my friends, detailing the heartbreak of losing her on the same day, and also sharing the details of her passing. While the kids were playing and everyone else was having a good time, my brother seemed stuck in his grief, casting a shadow over the celebration. Frustrated and feeling the party's mood dampened, I approached him and told him to leave if he couldn't be positive and enjoy the moment. He left upset. After the party, my mom confronted me, saying it was cruel to ask him to leave. According to her, I'm the idiot because he wasn't bothering anyone and just grieving. I feel he was being negative the entire time and making the party about him. But after what my mother said, I kind of feel terrible about asking him to leave. Am I the idiot? Wow, you are the idiot because you could have handled that more tactfully. Stuff gets complicated, and he probably thought, and wrongly, that your daughter's party would have been a helpful distraction. Or maybe he just couldn't bear the idea of being alone that day and made the best bad choice. We don't really know. Either way, instead of telling him to go, you could have told him it was okay for him to leave. He didn't have to stay if he didn't want to. You could have invited him to a private room for a moment. You could have sent one of the relatives to take him aside and sort him out. There's a dozen ways you could have done it without kicking him out. Yeah, you are the idiot. Your approach was awful. Yep, brother wants to be around people when he's alone and wants to be alone when he's around people. My guess is you made sure he'll choose the latter when it comes to you. Congrats. By the way, the only 1-year-old birthday parties I've ever attended are my own children's. What a waste of time. And your brother showed up anyway. I disagree. Everyone's the idiot here. According to Mom, I'm the idiot because he wasn't bothering anyone and was just grieving. It sounds like he was bothering people, though, having to be comforted by family members, repeatedly bringing up his wife's death, including details of it. He really should have left on his own accord, since it was too much for him to handle. My wife, Lisa, 29, and I, 30 male, have been married for 2 years. We both work and have no kids. Recently, Lisa's dog, Mango, our dog now, but Lisa's had Mango for a decade before we met, needed surgery that cost about $7,000, which made money pretty tight for us. I took out a pet care loan for a significant portion of the surgery under my name. If we pay it off in a year, we won't have interest, so we made a monthly budget to get it paid off within 1 year, and we've been paying it out of our joint account. Also, recently, my younger brother Johnny, 27, who has a history of addiction and mental health issues, reached out to me asking for a $2,000 loan because he needed legal fees for a custody battle with his baby mama. In the last few years, whenever he asks for money, everyone in my family refuses because it'll go to sugar. But this last year, he's been clean and able to hold down a job. I care about him, and he's had a really hard childhood compared to the rest of the siblings. So I get why he ended up the way he did and want to help him this time. Johnny said he'd pay me back, but I have a rule of never expecting it back when I give money to family, which I rarely do. I decided to take on a bunch of extra shifts at work during the last month and made enough money to send to him. I had some left to add to our monthly pet loan payment. I told Lisa the plan, thinking she'd be happy we could help Johnny out and also have some additional funds towards the pet loan payments. But she was angry that I was sending money to John when it all could go towards the loan. The way I see it, we already have a monthly budget for the loan, and we can pay it off in time without interest. I know that Mango is ours now, but technically that's my stepdog, for which I'm assuming responsibility because I love Lisa. When we found out how much Mango's surgery would cost, everyone advised us to put her down because she's also very old. But we went ahead with the surgery without thinking twice because Lisa loves Mango, and both our paychecks are going towards paying off her surgery. Meanwhile, I worked extra hours on my own to help my brother out so we could pay legal fees to be able to see his son. I told Lisa that if she wanted to pay off the pet loan earlier than the pre-planned schedule, I'd take on more shifts at work this month too. But Lisa just seemed angry that I would want to help Johnny at all. I don't understand why she expects us not to think twice about a $7,000 pet bill to save our 14-year-old dog, but is upset when I want to send $2,000 to my brother so we can see his child. I sent Johnny the money, and I'm sleeping on the couch now for that. But I don't think I did anything that outrageous. Am I the idiot? You are the idiot, not for wanting to help your brother, but you should not have given him the money directly. You should have paid it directly to his lawyer or whatever organization he's using. I can see where your wife is leaning towards a bill she knows you both have, rather than believing that your brother will be using the money as he states. You just handed him one heck of a temptation. That's exactly my thought. Directly pay the agency providing the service. An influx of cash can be a trigger that ends sobriety. Household finances have to be agreed upon. You agreed to the pet loan. She disagrees with the $2,000 gift since you don't expect it back. Dude, that amount of money should have been a conversation between you and your wife before agreeing to help your brother. I understand you want to help and love him, but you and your wife are a team. I disagree. OP is not the idiot. I think giving a person who's 1 year sober and trying to better himself is at least as wise as taking out a loan for a dog who's 14. I know people have a huge soft spot for dogs and a disdain for people with addiction, but OP has good intentions. Also, he's paying it all himself by picking up extra shifts specifically for this purpose. It's not like he's using their shared money. He can also stick to their originally outlined payment schedule. I just don't see the idiot territory here.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
What? I said, snapping my head around to look at my wife, Lydia. What did you just say? I asked, not believing what I thought I had just heard. Elliot, I know you're going to be mad, but I'm not happy right now, and I'm thinking of us getting a trial separation. So, I can get my head together and figure what I want. Lydia told me as I stood on the deck cooking steaks on the grill. My friend Maya has a spare room, and she said I could stay with her for the time being. When were you going to tell me, Lydia? Or were you just going to leave me a note on my pillow tonight? I said a little louder than he probably should have. Don't raise your voice, Elliot. I don't want Lucas to hear what we're talking about. Lucas being our 6-year-old son. I knew you'd react this way. That's why I didn't want to bring it up until tonight. So, in other words, you've already made up your mind to leave. Are you going to tell Lucas, or are you going to leave it to me after you're gone? I said in a sarcastic tone. I'll tell him myself tonight, before bed, she replied. This isn't permanent, you know. You're right, you're moving in with that bitch, Maya. I guess I should have seen it coming. I told her, getting angrier by the minute. I'll draft up the paperwork tomorrow, you can sign it, and I'll get it filed with the court by Wednesday, Lydia. What paperwork? Was her reply. Well, if you're going to leave, I want it to be a legal separation. That way when you don't come back, it will automatically turn into a divorce decree. This way we won't have to go through all the hassle twice, I told her. I don't want a divorce, Elliot, only a little time to myself, to sort out a few things. That's all, honey, Lydia replied. Bullshit, Lydia. I spat back at her. I've asked you to talk to me for the last 4 months, but you've been too busy with Maya and your new friends to make the time. Now you want to move in with your new buddy Maya so you can do what you have probably wanted to do for the last 6 months, I now yelled. But you're not going to do it with my blessings, and I'm certainly not going to stand by and become a cuck by you, or anyone else, I said, slamming the top down on the grill. This was not going the way Lydia had anticipated. She knew Elliot was going to be angry, but she thought she could convince him that this would be a growing experience for the both of them. But now, it had blown up in her face. Elliot, please, was all Lydia could get out before he stormed off in a huff, leaving her to tend the grill. Taking the steaks of the grill and putting them on the counter, she went looking for him. She found Elliot upstairs, in their bedroom. He was in the process of literally throwing all her clothes and everything else of hers into the spare bedroom. Take your shit and move the hell out. I don't care anymore, I screamed at her. I'll send the paperwork to your office, sign it, and get it back, rant. The lawyer Elliot had been using for the past 6 years. Don't worry, I'll take Lucas out to dinner so he doesn't have to watch his mother abandon him, I said, grabbing my coat and son before heading out to my car. Maya, this is Lydia, she started. Elliot didn't take it well, not well at all, and is threatening me with divorce, Lydia said, starting to get more than a little teary-eyed. I told you he wasn't going to be happy, but he'll come around soon, so don't worry, Maya told her over the phone. Hell, in a couple of weeks, he'll be begging you to come back, and then you will have him right where you want him. I hope you're right, Maya, because right now, he's ready to chuck me out the door and start divorce paperwork, she said hesitantly. I need some time away, but I don't want to end my marriage either, Lydia told her. I'll be right over and help you with your stuff, Maya told her. The sooner you are on your own and away from him, the sooner you can figure out what you really want. With that said, Maya drove over and helped Lydia pack up the majority of her stuff and was out of the house before Elliot and Lucas got back. I had seen this coming for quite a while. Lydia and I were both accountants and had met 8 years ago while we were both auditing a company that had gone Chapter 7. Each one of us were representing a different bank, which had a monetary stake in the failed company. We worked together and ended up having lunch and dinner with each other almost every night. It took us a full week to complete the audit, and by then we found that we really liked each other. Lydia was about 5 feet 6 inches, brown hair, and about 175 pounds. She had a beautiful face, but was a little chunky. Elliot was about 5 feet 8 inches tall, about 195, and at 22 already had a spare tire around his middle from eating out every day. These two geeks were made for each other. We were married 4 months later, and Lydia found herself pregnant 8 months after that. Lydia had a tough pregnancy and was bedridden the last 5 months, and such gained a ton of weight. By the time she gave birth to Lucas, she ballooned to almost 250 pounds. I, however, never said a word. I loved her no matter what her weight was. We were a happy family, until Lydia heard 2 of her co-workers talking about her. She's such a good-looking woman, one girl said to the other. Too bad she's as big as a house. I wonder if she has her clothes custom-made at Omar the tent maker's dress shop, she said, laughing out loud. They may have thought it was funny, but Lydia didn't. Lydia was crying in the bathroom when Maya walked in. You all right, Lydia? She asked. Everyone thinks I'm a fat pig, she said, crying. If they only knew how hard it was for me to lose weight, they wouldn't be so mean, she sobbed. Girl, look, all you need is to be put on a good diet and enroll at a gym, Maya told her. You are a beautiful girl, hiding underneath all that flab. That's all. You just need to make your mind up and do it. And that's what Lydia did. I did the books for a local gym and got us a great membership deal, so we joined the following week. The gym had an in-house nursery, so we were able to bring Lucas with us after work when we both went. Lydia was a woman possessed and worked out 6 days a week while I could only fit in maybe 3 nights per week. When the pounds didn't just fall off, Lydia went to a doctor and got a prescription for diet pills. I wasn't happy about it, but Lydia was on a mission to lose weight. 8 months later, Lydia was a slim 125 pounds and looked fantastic. She bought a whole new wardrobe and everyone, including the men at her work, said she looked great. That's when the trouble started. We were at Lydia's company Christmas party when the shit hit the fan. Lydia wore a dress that was more than a little revealing and was being hit on all night by her male co-workers. She was in 7th heaven with all the attention she was receiving. When a bunch guys caught her under the mistletoe, she must have kissed a dozen before I came over and put a stop to it. Lydia had probably had one too many drinks and never realized the guys' hands were all over her while they grabbed a kiss. I took Lydia by the arm and told her it was time for us to leave now. She didn't want to go just yet and made a bit of a scene. Lydia, I'm leaving right now with or without you, I finally told her. She relented, but I could tell she was pissed. On the way home, we had a huge fight. Lydia, you were acting like some kind of cheap hooker tonight. Me, along with everyone else, watched those guys put their hands all over your body, and you did nothing to stop them, I yelled. It was just a little innocent fun, that's all. No big deal, she replied. Not from where I stood, I told her. How would you like it if I was all over some girl, kissing and grabbing at her? I asked, but I knew she was too drunk to listen to reason at that point. Lydia got sick that night. Luckily, she had removed her new dress before she tossed her cookies. She looked like hell the next morning and apologized to me, saying it would never happen again. But it did. It's just that I wasn't around the next time. Lydia started stopping after work, on Wednesdays, for a girls' night out. There were 7 girls, some married and others not, who would stop for a drink or two at Mario's, after work. It started off that she'd be home by 6:30, but soon it stretched to 7:30 and finally to almost 9 p.m. By the time Lydia got home, Lucas was in bed, and I was not in the best of moods. When they first got married, we had screwed like teenagers and couldn't get enough of each other. Now it seemed, if we did it once a week, that was a lot. One thing for certain, when Lydia came home on Wednesday nights, she was hot to trot, and tonight was no exception. Neither one of us had what you would call a lot of sexual experience when we first got married, and were a little apprehensive to try any new things from the get-go. We learned, from each other, what each one of us liked, and through a few positions, we added a lot things to our repertoire. Now, however, every week when Lydia got home, she seemed to want to try something new and exciting, most of which I wondered where she'd gotten the idea. When we got married, Lydia couldn't give a BJ worth a shit. But then, even a bad BJ was better than no BJ at all. Tonight, she came out of the bathroom totally naked and asked, "Where's my stud muffin?" She'd had more than a few drinks and was later than normal, but she knew how to get me into a good mood. She climbed up from the foot of the bed, on me. We had some wild sex. Goddamn. I needed that, she said, while rolling onto her back. I crept up, kissed her, and told her how happy I was, being married to her. Well, that is the way it used to be until this week. After dinner, Lucas and I came home to an empty house. That bitch Maya, I thought to myself. Ever since Lydia lost that weight, Maya's been on her to do this or that with her. No wonder her husband left her. She was nothing but a tramp, and is now turning my wife into one also. I got Lucas ready for bed, tucked him in, and read him a story. When he asked about his mother, I just told him that Mommy was visiting and would be home in a couple of days, but I didn't believe it for a minute. I went downstairs, called my mom, and brought her up to speed. Mom, can you watch Lucas during the day until I can find someone permanent? I asked. Honey, Lydia will come to her senses and be back by the end of the week. You know her. She can't be away from Lucas more than a few hours before she goes nuts, Mom told me. But I'll be over before you go to work and watch him. I hoped she was right, but I wasn't as sure as my mom. On Monday, I contacted Grant and told him that Lydia had left me. I want to make sure I'm totally protected, including having permanent custody of Lucas. I want it written up and spelled out in no uncertain terms that if either one of us acts in a way a married spouse shouldn't, the other gets a 65 to 35 split of the assets. I think she is looking to cheat on me, and I want to be covered. I told Grant. I want it to have a 60-day expiration date, after which it becomes a divorce decree. And can you get it done by tomorrow? I asked. Aren't you jumping the gun a little, Elliot? She just left, and you're ready to write up divorce papers? He asked me. Lydia's been planning this for a while, and maybe this will bring her to her senses. If not, I don't want to lose all I've worked for just because she wants to try out some new. I told him. All right, Elliot. I'll get it done today and have her served at work tomorrow. Anything else? Not that I can think of. I just need to draw a line in the sand so she understands what she stands to lose. That's all. Also, Grant, I will need 2 other agreements made up, but we've got a little time on those. I'll fax you what I want later in the week. When Lydia got to work Tuesday, she was a little bummed. This is the longest she'd been away from Lucas and Elliot in the last 8 years. Coming back from lunch, she was told a man was waiting in her office. Lydia Harper? He asked. Yes, I'm Lydia. What can I do for you? She replied. You have been served, he said, handing her a manila envelope. Lydia spent the next half an hour going over all the conditions and property divisions outlined in the separation decree. Although it read more like actual divorce paperwork, it stated that Elliot would have temporary but full custody of Lucas, but Lydia would be allowed visitation, with reasonable notice. By the time she was done reading it, she was more hurt than angry. I've been gone for 2 days, and Elliot's already written off our marriage, she said to herself. She tried to reach Elliot, but his secretary said he was out for the day, and his cell went right to voicemail. Elliot was at this moment at home changing the locks, taking care of splitting their finances and taking Lydia's name off his insurance and 401k. By 4 o'clock, I was done with all my business and turned on my cell phone. Shit, I said to myself, 12 messages from Lydia. I deleted them all. I had dinner with Lucas at my mother's house and told her what I'd done. Lydia's going to be mad as hell, Elliot. I would be if I was in her shoes. How far do you intend to take it? She asked. All the way, Mom, I replied. I can't fix this marriage by myself, especially since she won't listen to reason. So I've upped the stakes. She started this mess, but by God, I'll finish it if I find out she has been cheating on me. I used to trust her, but right now I wouldn't believe a word that comes out of her mouth. So right now, I'm protecting my son and myself. If we do get back together, great. If not, I'll hold all the cards. Son, I've never seen this side of you. Remind me never to get on your bad side, my mom said with a laugh. Lydia stopped at her house and tried to use her key. What the hell? She said to herself before noticing it was a new lock. Damn him. She opened her cell and tried Elliot's number again. Like before, it went to voicemail. So she left him another message. Everything's now done and in place, I thought to myself as I looked at my checklist. Now all I can do is wait. Lydia was at Elliot's office Wednesday morning. My credit cards won't work, and when I went to pick up my prescription, on the way to work, they told me I no longer had insurance. Do you hate me that much, Elliot? Just covering my bases, Lydia. Remember? You walked out on me. I'll pay for all the household expenses and Lucas, but you will have to take care of your own from now on. That way we won't have any financial issues to argue over. Elliot, you're letting this get totally out of control, Lydia now shouted. I just needed a little time to myself, that's all. Leaning over my desk, I said in my most serious and deadpan tone. Lydia, do you see the word stupid tattooed across my forehead? I may not be the most savvy guy in the world, but I wasn't born yesterday. Maya has got your head so turned around. You can't seem to find your butt with both hands. You think you can go out and act like you're single again without any consequences. Think again. The first time I find out you've broken your marital vows, we done? Shit, you've probably already done it. So I don't even know why we're having this conversation right now. I'm so angry at you right now I can't see straight. So I think it would be best if you just leave. So I don't say anything that will put what's left of our marriage in the toilet. With that I sat down. Lydia was shocked and got angry herself. You can't dictate to me like I'm a little child. I'm an equal partner in this marriage, so screw you. She spat at me. Well, that hasn't happened much in the last 6 months either, but I suppose you're getting all you can handle now on the side anyway, I said just loud enough so Lydia could hear. With that she turned tail and walked out. I knew that she hadn't done anything yet, but had been close. You see, I had started to have her followed on Wednesdays about a month ago. There was a lot of pecks and handplay, but that's all the further it had gone. I knew she would be tempted, living with Maya. So I wanted to make sure that Lydia understood exactly what would happen if she cheated on me. But my life was unraveling. The first 2 weeks were tough. Lydia made it a point to visit Lucas, but never said more than 2 words to me. I still had her followed, but not much new happened. She was still going out with Maya and her friends, but instead of just Wednesdays, she was out at least 4 nights a week. Looks like someone is trying to make up for lost time, I said to myself looking at the report. I did, however, find a nanny of sorts to take care of Lucas, a girl just out of college who couldn't find a job. Ivy was 23, blonde, about 5 feet 9 inches and had a slight build. She'd gotten her degree, but could find only part-time work, so when she saw my ad for a nanny, she jumped at the chance. Ivy had come from a large family and knew how to take care of and handle young boys. She had 2 younger brothers. So, we came to an agreement on pay and hours, and she moved in the following day. Ivy worked as a waitress at a mid-priced family restaurant on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday evenings. The other nights we all ate together. After a few weeks, Lucas became very at ease with Ivy, especially when she read to him before bed. Ivy, I really appreciate you going the extra mile with Lucas. With his mother out of the picture, for the moment, he needs all the stability in his life I can give him, I said with the best smile I could muster. I know about you and your wife. Your mother filled me in on all the details in case Lydia came over and tried to grab him. Ivy told me. I just can't believe she'd just walk out on you like that. I've only known you for a short time, but you're one of the most caring men I've ever met, and I can see you love Lucas to death. I guess Lydia got confused at what was really important and let others convince her that the grass was greener on the other side of the fence, I replied. Well, it'll be over one way or in another 40 days, and it can't come too soon for me. Little did I know, my life would take a major shift and that shit would hit the fan in less than a week. You see, I am a silent partner in the accounting firm I work for. I've brought in so much new business over the last 2 years. The owners made me a 15% partner. I asked that it be kept secret because I didn't want to be known as one of the owners. In that way, I could find out what the employees really thought of the company and how it was being run. My latest accomplishments was a meeting with an overseas garment manufacturer, which had plants in 5 Asian countries. I had met the owners at a party about a year ago and thrown a few of my ideas their way. They were impressed, so much so, we met the following week to talk about our firm taking them on. Elliot, I like the way your firm operates. You seem to go beyond the norm and put a personal touch to everything you do, one of the prospective owners told him. Each plant right now operates independently, so I need someone to set up the same system in each facility so we can run them all from one overseas office. They weren't happy that I wouldn't be handling the overseas operation myself, but I convinced them that I would monitor everything that was going on myself so that there would be no slip-ups. With a signed contract and a handshake, the party began. We had been working on this account for 9 months, and I would have loved to come home to Lydia with my good news. I would have loved to have taken her out to the best restaurant, brought her home, and ravished her body. But when I got home, the house was empty and so was his heart. Ivy came in with Lucas 20 minutes later with Chinese takeout. I was busting at the seams and had to tell someone my great news, so I told Ivy, "Forget dinner. We're all going out tonight and celebrate," I told her. "Put on your finest, because we're going out in style." My bosses had made reservations at the best restaurant in town for 8 o'clock and were sending a limo around to pick us up at 7:30. So, we had to hurry. I shaved, showered, and got dressed. I told Ivy that I would get Lucas ready so she would have more time. By 7:15, Lucas and I were both dressed and ready to go. That's when I saw Ivy descend the stairs. "I hope you don't mind. I didn't have anything fancy, so I found one of your wife's dresses that kind of fit," she explained to me. She was right, it kind of fit. It fit her like a silk glove, but was a little short, since she was a lot taller than Lydia. "Do you think it looks okay?" "You look great, Ivy," I said with my mouth hanging wide open as the bell rang. The 3 of us were led into the back of the limousine just as Lydia was driving down our street. "What the hell?" is all she could say as she saw them all pile into the stretch limo. "I wonder what's going on," she thought as she turned her car around to follow them. She then watched them get out and go into the restaurant. "That a-hole? He'll take them out to the best place in town. And when I wanted to go before, he said we couldn't afford it," she steamed. "And who in the hell was the girl wearing my dress?" We all had a wonderful night. I was the guest of honor, and we ate and drank our fill. It was Ivy who told me it was time to leave, as Lucas was getting tired, because it was way past his bedtime. "You're right, we'd better leave, or we'll never get him up in the morning for school." I thanked everyone for the dinner, but as they shook my hand, they were looking past me to Ivy, and not only the men. Ivy looked hot tonight, and all the women looked jealously at her. They'd all heard the story of Lydia's leaving to find herself, and it looks like Elliot wasted no time in replacing her. They chuckled to themselves. It was a quiet ride home as Lucas fell asleep as soon as we got in the limo. I carried him upstairs, undressed him, and put him into bed with a kiss on the forehead goodnight. I walked downstairs, still in my tux, and found Ivy enjoying a glass of wine at the kitchen table. "I want to thank you for tonight. You didn't have to take me, you know," she told me with a smile. "How could I have left you here alone tonight? And besides, I really enjoy your company, Ivy," I said, pouring myself a glass of wine. "I hope it wasn't too boring for you tonight, sitting around with a bunch of accountants." "Quite the contrary. I never knew your job was so interesting and all the people seem to really like you." "Including myself," she said with a little smile. "You make me feel like part of your family, even though I'm just the nanny. Be still my heart, and God damn it, I wish my hard-on wasn't so apparent," I thought as I hid my thing from Ivy. It had been a while since I had made real love to a woman. The last few times with Lydia were disappointing, as she had just gone through the motions. I would love to take Ivy to my bedroom, but I also knew I was still married, and I would remain true to Lydia no matter what. Tonight was magical, and my mind is reeling with things I'd like to be doing right now, but they're not going to happen tonight, much to my dismay, I told her. Maybe if things were different, but they're not. So with that, I need to take a cold shower and go to sleep, I told Ivy, kissing her on the cheek as she gave me a hug. It was 2 in the morning when I felt Ivy climb into my bed next to me. By the heat she generated, I could tell she was naked. I started to say something, but she put her finger to my lips. "I know we can't do anything tonight. I just want to be close to you, that's all," she said as she spooned me. I woke up alone the next morning. I found Ivy downstairs dressed, cooking breakfast for the 3 of us. Nothing was said. Lydia was pissed. Here I am trying to figure out what I want in my life with Elliot, and he has already tossed me to the curb and found some bimbo, she said, slamming her hand on the desk. She had made the mistake mentioning it to Maya, who told her that all husbands cheat on their wives. and that tonight they should go out and celebrate her newfound freedom. She didn't feel like going out and partying tonight and really wanted to talk to Elliot, but he was always in some damn meeting. How can one person be so damn busy? Lydia and the group met at Mario's again, and it was packed as usual. After a couple of drinks, most of their group headed for home, but not Lydia and Maya. A couple of good-looking guys were trying to stake their claim, and Maya was already making out with one of them. The other guy had her on the dance floor, and when a slow dance started, she melted into his arms. His warm hands were all over her body as Lydia felt herself slowly succumbing to his advances. She hadn't been with a man in a long time, and this guy was great-looking, had the body of a Greek god, and wanted her as much as she wanted him. She never stopped him when he kissed her as they danced. She never stopped him as he steered her over to the corner of the dance floor and up against the wall. She, however, should have stopped him when he put his hands into her dress and fondled her. Yes, she should have stopped him, especially because the PI Elliot had hired was getting it all on tape. The four of them had gone back to Maya's place, and even though Lydia was now naked, lying on the bed with him, she finally came to her senses. I just can't do it, she told him. I'm still married, and no matter what I still love my husband, she told him above his objections. So, he left her alone, and Lydia took one of 2 cold showers that night. I've got to get my head wired, she told herself the next morning. But things beyond her control had started changing her life, and not for the better. On my computer screen I saw the pictures of Lydia, the final one being the 4 of them entering Maya's apartment. I emailed them to my attorney and told him to get the paperwork together, but to hold it until Monday. I guess she's finally made up her mind, I said sadly, because I had really wanted to get back together with Lydia, but no longer. I'm going to handle the Asian project myself, I told my bosses the next day. I need to get away, and this will give me the time to clear my head and get my life back in order, I told them. Elliot, everything is set for startup on the 12th, which is a week from next Tuesday. Can you be ready to leave by them? They asked. Give me 2 days to get my affairs in order and set up with an apartment, so I'll have a place to send my things, I told them. I've got to talk to 2 more people today, and if everything going according to plan, I'll be ready. That afternoon, I set up my staff to handle all my unfinished projects. I drafted paperwork to give my mother my power of attorney and told Grant to serve papers on Lydia the following Monday. I would be safely in the air while she was being served, same amount of notice that she gave me, I said sadly. That night I went home to a house that wouldn't be mine when I returned from overseas and felt really sad. Lydia and I had picked it out together, and there were so many good memories associated with it. And now they would all be gone. I was unusually quiet at dinner, and Ivy thought it was something she'd done. No, it's just that I've got a lot on my mind. We'll talk after Lucas goes to bed, I told her. By 10 o'clock the house was quiet as the 2 of us stared at each other. Ivy spoke first. What's the matter, Elliot? If it's about the other night, I'm really sorry and it won't happen again. I promise, she told me. Ivy, it's not that. Remember that party the company threw me a couple of weeks ago? Well, I've decided to do the overseas work myself, and Lucas and I'll be leaving early Monday morning, I told her. And I have an important question to ask you, I started to say, as I now saw Ivy starting to cry. Do you want to go with us? She went from teary-eyed to all smiles. Hell yes, she told me as she ran into my arms. Do you have an updated passport, Ivy? I asked. I had it updated last year when I went on a cruise with my college friends, she told me. Well, then it's all set. You will need to have everything packed up by Saturday because they're shipping out all our stuff ahead of time. Leave just enough clothes for the rest of the weekend and Monday's travel clothes. You can tell your family and friends, but I don't want Lydia to know until we're in the air. I'm not sure if it's totally legal to just take Lucas with us and leave, but I'm doing it anyway. I'll answer all the questions when we get back, I told her. That night I got with my mother and explained everything to her, including giving her my power of attorney. Shit will probably hit the fan Monday afternoon with Lydia, but I still want you to put the house up for sale next week. Grant will send you a copy of the papers I'm sending to Lydia, and if she has any questions, just tell her to talk to Grant. You sure this is what you want, Elliot? You don't want to try and straighten it out with her? My mom asked. She's made her bed, and now she can sleep in it, with whomever she wishes, I told her. You're taking Ivy with you? She said, trying to get the final piece out of her son. I'm not sure where we're headed, but she makes me smile and keeps me sane. Other than that, I may have some real feelings for her. And that's all I'm going to say about it. We will be over Sunday night, so you can say goodbye to Lucas, I told her. Monday, Lydia was trying to get Elliot on the phone when his work told her that he was on a special outside project, but would pass the message on to him. Now what the hell was he doing? She thought as she tried his cell phone to no avail. Lydia Harper? The man asked. She nodded. You have been served, he said, handing her the envelope. Now what? She said as she ripped into the envelope. There was a brief note from Elliot stating that I guess I'd made my decision. Hope you have a great life, is how he ended it. And then she saw the pictures. Oh shit, is all she could say. How in the hell did he get those pictures? She thought. The son of a bitch must have had me followed, she said as she flipped through them. Not the kind of pictures you'd like to see of your wife with another man, but I never slept with him. I've got to make him understand that, she said to herself. Gone. What do you mean gone? Was her reply. Elliot is on a 4 to 5 month project overseas. He left with Lucas Monday morning, Elliot's mother told Lydia. He can't take Lucas away from me, especially out of the country, she shouted. I'll take him to court. I'll see he's thrown in jail, she yelled. Lydia, Elliot has full custody of Lucas, remember? You gave up that right when you left to find yourself, she reminded her. To say you screwed up royally would be a gross understatement. You had a great marriage, but I guess you wanted more. Now you've got nothing, Elliot's mother told her. I have to talk to him and explain that it's not what it looks like, Lydia said, sobbing. I still love him and never went to bed with anyone else. He's got to believe that. Lydia, I saw the pictures, and if my husband was alive and was doing what you were doing, I'd divorce him. If I were you, I'd write him a letter and explain what you need to, and I'll make sure he gets it. In the meantime, I'd get a lawyer. Lydia did a good job stating her case. And that alcohol had played a major part, and that she'd stopped it and hadn't gone all the way with anyone since she left. Lydia said that she still loved me and would wait for me to come home to her. Elliot's reply was short and to the point. Lydia, you haven't been a wife to me since you lost all that weight last year. It was like you were now too good for me. You ate up the attention of all the men and made me feel like I was being used on Wednesday nights when you finally decided to come home to me. You were all hot and bothered, and all you wanted was good sex, not to make love to your husband. I guess I no longer turned you on. So now, you and Maya are free to screw whomever you want. I told you Maya would eventually break us up, but you knew better. You're right. Lucas, Ivy and I are building a new life based on love and trust. You can see Lucas anytime you want. Just get a camera modem for your computer and I'll set it up. Sign the papers, because Mom is putting the house up for sale this week. There isn't a chance in hell that we'll ever get back together, so don't hold out hope I'll change my mind. I hope you finally got what you were looking for, Lydia, and are happy. I never wanted this to happen. Lydia knew Elliot was right. She'd been a stupid idiot for listening to all her good friends, who knew what they were talking about. I guess that's why they were all divorced. She was going to fight it until she got Elliot's letter and finally signed the papers. The irony was that 6 months later, Lydia was back to the 175 pounds she'd started with 2 years earlier, but no longer had Elliot. I was happy, though. The work was a little tough because of the language barrier, but I worked through that. Lucas was picking up a word here and there and managed to communicate quite with all the kids he played with. Ivy took care of Lucas and set up the agenda for our free time. Places to see, things to do, is how she phrased it. I still remember that night months ago. It was just after we arrived in country, and we were all a little stressed. Lucas fought going to bed. My program wasn't going as smooth as it should, and Ivy felt a little overwhelmed. She went into the den and kissed the back of my neck, which brought a smile to my face. She reached down, took me by the hand, and led me into their bedroom. It had one candle on each side of our bed. We undressed each other and slipped into bed. Let's just say, heaven and earth became one that night. We had tender, loving sex for the first time. Over the next few months, we did everything the other one wanted, unless it involved pain or some type of farm animals. We were more than happy. 5 months later, my mom met us at the airport. She was happy to see us all, especially Lucas. On the way home, she kept glancing over at Ivy, who seemed to have this content look on her face. How far along are you? She asked her. Ivy seemed a little taken back. 3 months? How did you know? I'm barely showing, she replied. You two just looked way too happy, like the cat that ate the canary, she told us. 2 weeks later, we were married, and Ruby was born 6 months later. When Ivy said she wanted to join a gym to get rid of her baby weight, I looked like I had seen a ghost. 2 days later, I sprung the news that I had hired her a personal trainer and that she would be supplying all the equipment. No use going through all that shit a second time, I thought to myself. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Growing up, I always admired my family's resilience and the strength of our bond. My parents, Sally and Edward, built a life rooted in hard work and family values. They taught my brother Eric and me the importance of loyalty and carrying forward the legacy of our family business. Even as a child, I knew Tyndall Manufacturing was more than just a company. It was the cornerstone of our identity. After college, I took on my role in the company with pride, eager to contribute to its success. Eric, my younger brother, joined the team too, though our approaches to work were as different as night and day. While I focused on precision and strategy, Eric excelled at charm and persuasion. Despite the occasional clash, I always believed our shared commitment to the company and family would prevail over any rivalry. Friday had arrived, and I had dropped off my Volvo at the service center for maintenance. Instead of returning to the office, I asked the mechanic to drop me off at home since he would deliver the car later that evening. It was a sunny spring day, the kind of weather that invites you to tackle outdoor chores, so the decision was an easy one. As I busied myself clearing leaves near the edge of the backyard, I noticed the unmistakable red gleam of my brother's Corvette pulling into the driveway. Great, I thought. The only time he comes over is when he needs something he never returns. As I got closer, I heard my son Sam call out, "Hey, Dad, what's up in the land of chickens?" Dad? Why was he calling my brother Dad? And why was this the land of chickens? My brother said, "I'm dropping off Uncle Joe's saw. I cut the cord by mistake and he needs to fix it so I can finish my project." "Is Clueless Joe here?" he added. "Clueless Joe?" I thought. My name's Joe, and I certainly don't think I'm clueless. At least, I didn't until now. Maybe I should stay outside and just listen. Of course, I turned on my phone to record the conversation. Sam answered, "Clueless isn't home. He's usually not here before 5. I don't spend much time with him." Then Sam asked, "So when can I visit you now that school's out? It's way more fun there than here." "I'd love for you to come, but your mom wants to spend as much time with you as she can. You're her only child, and when you leave, she'll be lonely." "Cut her some slack on this," my brother explained. Sam replied, "She promised to spend time with me Thursday afternoon, so I can ask about staying with you this summer." That's when Sam asked, "Why doesn't Mom divorce Clueless and move in with you?" I had no idea she spent afternoons at my brother's house. Everything started falling into place in a way I hated. Maybe I was clueless. Eric bragged, "Ever since I got her pregnant with you, I've asked her about leaving Joe. She says, 'You're great in bed, but you'd be a terrible husband.' I love my husband. Every moment with him is the best. But with you, the Zex is amazing. That's why she won't divorce Joe, but still sleeps with me. Anyway, I've got to go. I'll see you tomorrow at the family party," Eric said casually, like it was no big deal. I felt like I was going to collapse. My world was falling apart. My son wasn't really mine, and my wife had been involved with my brother in ways I never imagined. I stumbled back to the yard and sat on the rope swing. I had pushed Sam on that swing countless times. Now, I sat there crying, the tears mixing with the mud at my feet. What was I supposed to do? I needed to figure this out before taking any action. Then it hit me. The DNA test. Years ago, we all did the 23andMe test. How could it be wrong, unless Carol swapped my sample with Eric's, hiding the truth about Sam's parentage? Could she have done something that cruel to me? As that thought faded, I took stock of my life. I'm Joe Tyndall, 43, and I haven't gained much weight since college. 175 pounds. I wasn't a jock, but I was a good distance runner. Now, between family and work, I run a few times a week. I work as the CFO and COO of Tyndall's Machine Company, a family business. My grandfather started as a blacksmith, and now we make precision aerospace parts. My dad, Edward, is the president, and my brother Eric is the CMO. I have degrees in industrial engineering and accounting, which is why I handle the finances and operations. Eric, my younger brother, is everything I'm not. At 6'3", he towers over me by 5 inches and weighs 50 pounds more. A classic jock, big, loud, arrogant, and often a bully. Eric was a star running back in high school. A small college scholarship got him through school, while I worked and took out loans. He barely graduated, with professors passing him just to keep him eligible for football. With a degree in physical education, Eric struggled to find a job, so he joined Tyndall's as a junior mechanic. Our work demands precision, which wasn't his strength, but he used his name to land new clients. While he couldn't discuss the technical side, he was great at talking his way through things. Don't get me wrong, Eric was good at his job and valuable to the company, but we often clashed. One time, Eric wanted a commission for new sales. It wasn't unreasonable, but he was already drawing a salary equal to mine. I used that moment to ask to keep all the income from my patents. Dad quickly gave in to Eric, but I had to fight for what I earned. I first noticed Carol during a 5K charity run. She wore loose shorts and a t-shirt, and her shape, particularly her backside, caught my eye. As a runner, I was faster than her, but I preferred staying behind her. By the end of the race, I was the only one focused on her. After she stumbled avoiding a dropped water bottle, I helped steady her. "Thanks," she said, smiling. "I didn't want to fall." "I'm Joe," I introduced myself. "I'm Carol." "Can I run with you just to make sure you don't fall again?" I asked. She grinned. "Sure." That was the start of our relationship. Carol had a degree in secondary education and worked as an English teacher. A year after we met, we got married in her home church. After 2 wonderful years, we decided to start a family. Despite our best efforts, countless nights and weekends focused on getting pregnant, Carol couldn't conceive. We tried everything, changing diets, different positions, tracking ovulation, but nothing worked. Neither of us wanted to get fertility tests yet. Maybe in a year, we thought. Then Carol missed her period. She didn't tell me right away, worried about jinxing it. When she missed a second one, I was overjoyed. I had always wanted a family, and our Tyndall legacy was something I deeply valued. But the pregnancy wasn't easy. Carol was bedridden for the final 2 months, and the delivery almost cost both her and our son. Sam, who grew too large for her pelvis, was delivered by cesarean section. The doctor warned us against trying for another child due to the high risk to Carol's health. That was it for us. Sam became our one and only. Sam was an energetic boy, full of life. He loved roughhousing with me, much to Carol's dismay. We spent hours tossing a ball around. His grades weren't stellar, but average for his age. However, after his 15th birthday, our relationship began to change. I figured it was just typical teenage rebellion. He used to enjoy spending time with me, but now he was too busy with his phone and Game Boy. When I tried to talk to him, he became surly and distant, often mocking my career as an accountant, especially as he grew taller and more muscular than I was. Over the years, Carol continued to be the ideal wife, smart, dedicated, and now the principal of McKinley School, which specialized in helping students with academic and behavioral struggles. But I started noticing tension at home. Her stress from work seemed to spill over, and she'd make sharp comments about things I did or didn't do. Despite this, she remained affectionate at bedtime. Our bed life was fulfilling and frequent. So when I overheard my brother Eric telling Sam that he was his father and had been sleeping with Carol for over 17 years, I was stunned. But what did I really know? The most troubling thing was that Sam's body frame resembled Eric's and my father's, but not mine. Something felt off, but I wasn't sure what. That evening, I watched Carol closely. There were no obvious signs of an affair. Dinner was lively, and after Sam went out with friends, Carol and I cleaned the kitchen together. She asked me to load the dishwasher while she went to the bathroom, then returned wearing only a lace apron, telling me to hurry up because she had plans for me. We laughed, touched, and finished cleaning before heading to bed, where I had some of the best sex I'd ever had. She was passionate and responsive. No signs of faking. The next morning, we drove to my parents' house for my father's 70th birthday. Carol didn't want to ride in my Volvo, and Sam wanted to drive himself, so we all went in her Lexus. At my parents' house, the greetings were routine: Carol, Sam, then me. But when Eric hugged Carol, it was warm and enthusiastic on his part, but her response was flat, even bored. This wasn't how a lover should behave after 17 years of affair. I was beginning to piece things together, but I didn't want to seem suspicious. So I casually tested the waters. I asked Eric if he'd cover for me at the office on Thursday, knowing he had no clue about accounting. He said he'd be out for a big project. Carol, sitting across from him, made a strange noise as she blew bubbles in her iced tea, her way of signaling I was on the right track. I pressed further, joking, "Will you get all sweaty from this big project?" He responded, "Nah, I've worked with this person before and always come out on top." Carol's reaction was so intense I could feel the tension rise. The room went silent. No one moved, no forks clinked, no ice rattled in glasses. It was like a graveyard. I realized they all knew. I was still playing the role of clueless Joe, but I was starting to understand what was really going on. Breaking the silence, Dad announced, "I'm retiring from being president of Tyndall. Eric will take over as president. Joe's salary will be 75% of Eric's, but with his patent income, you'll both make about the same." It was clear now. The family business, my father's legacy, was being passed down to Eric, and I had been kept in the dark all this time. Carol squeezed my arm, giving me a warm smile. "So I report directly to Eric?" I asked, trying to clarify. Eric, the guy who can't tell a CNC machine from a popcorn popper? That's a disaster waiting to happen, Carol replied with a shake of her head. Before I could respond, she continued, Listen, little brother, I've always been the one in charge while you've been busy counting beans. It takes an alpha, not a chicken like you, to lead. Deal with it, Joe. Once again, I win, you lose. That's enough, boys, Dad cut in, his voice firm. He turned to Eric, who had been quiet up until now. Eric, you won't be the boss. I'm still the chairman of the board and I own all the stock. You'll run this business the way I tell you. This company has been in the family for over 100 years and I won't let it fall apart. We're Tyndalls and the legacy is in our hands, just like the men on the wall. Dad pointed to the framed photos of 3 generations of Tyndalls that lined the living room wall. By the way, Dad, I asked, curious, which picture is your grandfather? Dad paused for a moment before answering. He's on the left, next to my father. I'm on the far end. Thought you'd know that. I was just confirming, I said, because I have a question. I glanced at the pictures. I don't look like any Tyndall, alive or dead. Different body type, hair color, facial expression. Eric and Sam look like Tyndalls, but not me. What's going on? My mother's shoulders sagged and Dad's face went red. The room went silent and everyone exchanged uncomfortable looks. I'd dropped a bomb, and now they had to deal with it. Joe, it's time you knew the family secret, Dad said, his voice heavy. Your mother and I were planning to marry, but she got pregnant after a drunken night at her bachelorette party. We were already sleeping together, so she thought the baby was mine. When you were born, you were small and sickly, but we thought it was because of your mother's complications. We didn't know until you were about 10 that you weren't my biological son. Your mother had kept it hidden. She'd slept with someone else before we were married, and you looked like him. When DNA tests became available, we confirmed you weren't my son, but Eric was. That explained a lot about how I'd been treated differently from Eric, but it wasn't the bombshell I was expecting. I'd been trying to find out about Sam's biological father and got this instead. Still, I had more questions. Okay, Dad, that explains my body type. But why doesn't Sam look like me? Why does he resemble you and Eric? Dad's voice softened. Joe, you and Carol were desperate to have a child. It was stressful for Carol, and she came to your mother for advice. After a lot of thought, we realized you were likely sterile from your severe case of mumps. We knew for the Tyndall legacy to continue, Eric needed to help. Carol was reluctant at first, but she agreed because we all wanted the family to continue. We hoped this wouldn't come out, but with DNA tests and the differences in body types, it was bound to be discovered. I felt overwhelmed, like a storm was raging inside my head. No words came to me. Both Carol and my mom held me, tears in their eyes, knowing how much pain I was in. My mom whispered, my son, I'm so proud of you. Carol said softly, my husband, I love you so much. Dad added, we hoped you'd understand, Joe, and embrace the love we all have for you. Gee, Edward, I muttered bitterly. Can I call you Edward now that I know you're not my father? Why would you think I wouldn't mind being humiliated by my own family? Sam sneered. Now you know what it's like to be humiliated. I had to grow up thinking you were my father when I knew the truth about Eric. Everyone turned to Sam in shock, and Carol snapped back. Joe's been the best father anyone could ask for. He gave everything for you. You should be grateful he raised you. Sarcastically, I shot back, why wait so long to show concern for my feelings? Why not tell me the truth right away instead of lying all these years? I bet you had a good laugh behind my back while I proudly talked about my great son. Instead, you called me Clueless Joe. Once again, the room was silent. We couldn't tell you, Joe, Dad said, his voice heavy. It would have hurt too much, and we hoped no one would find out. We needed you at the plant. You're the brains behind everything. We'd be lost without you. Plus, we couldn't afford anyone as good as you. A headhunter told us the salary for CFO and COO was more than double what we pay you. I felt my anger rise. So, you encouraged my brother to father my child, not mine, just to keep the Tyndall bloodline going. You kept me working for peanuts to boost your profits. You made me think I'd be running the show one day, but I guess Tyndall blood is more important than competence. I can't believe you did this to me. What's next? Are you going to tell me Carol's still sleeping with Eric? The room went still. I waited for an answer, bracing myself. Carol finally spoke in a small, trembling voice. I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't love him. I hate him for what he is. but I needed him to keep my sanity. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing. My instinct was to comfort her, but my anger held me back. She had done this to herself. She had to face the consequences. Dad spoke, but his voice was shaky. "I'm sorry, son, but we—" "Son?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Don't call me that. You destroyed my whole life, gave me nothing but the bare minimum of affection compared to Eric, encouraged my wife to cheat on me, all while I had no idea. I was just a fool. Now you're telling me I'm not even your son? You've all been laughing behind my back while I played the clueless idiot. I'm done with all of you. You've been screwing me over for your own gain, and none of it benefited me. I'm nothing but a sucker. I'm like a lost child, abandoned with no one to help me." With that, I stormed toward the door, but just as I reached it, Eric grabbed my arm. "I'm sorry, Joe," he said, smirking. "Since this means so much to you, I'll stop screwing your wife. She's all stretched out for me anyway, so I'll give her back to you." The arrogance of that man hit me like a slap. I turned toward him, seething, but as I spun, I landed a punch aimed at his face, only to miss and strike him in the throat instead. His eyes bulged, and he gasped for air, collapsing to his knees. I didn't hesitate. I stepped back and kicked him in the groin, watching him scream and crumple in pain. Carol and Sam rushed to him, but their reactions were different. Sam tried to comfort his mother's lover, while Carol began kicking Eric in rage, shouting, "You deserve this!" I left the chaos behind and got into Carol's car. I backed it into Eric's precious Corvette before speeding away, clipping Edward's new pickup on the way out. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger, and I could barely keep the car on the road. I found a deserted gas station to stop and let my emotions run wild. First, I cried until I thought I might pass out. Then the anger exploded, and I pounded the car's dashboard. Finally, exhaustion set in, and I was too drained to move. As I sat there, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts and calls from Carol. I sighed deeply. What could I do now? They'd shattered everything. Not only was I betrayed, but my mother had also kept the truth about my real father hidden from me. 3 days ago, I was on top of the world. Now, my life felt like a total mess. The only good thing I could focus on was that I had options. I could stay clueless Joe, keep my low pay, and report to Eric or Edward, but seeing them every day would gut me, especially after what they'd done. I couldn't do it. Option 1 was out. Option 2 was to quietly leave and let the Tyndall family carry on without me. But they wouldn't care. I was already invisible to them. That wasn't an option either. Option 3 was the one I liked. Stay in the family, but on my terms. I'd make them regret every lie, cheat, and betrayal. I'd make them feel the same pain they caused me. Yeah, that felt right. I was 20 miles from home, and it was time to go. Carol's car was in the yard, not the driveway, and I'd packed up everything I needed into my Volvo. Important papers, clothes, and all. Anything I didn't need immediately went into Sam's Acura. Bullet, Sam's annoying dog, whined at me as I left, but I was glad to be rid of the hassle. He left me a parting gift, a big pile of crap next to the house. I scooped it up, walked into the master bedroom, and placed it on the wedding ring quilt my mother and grandmother made for us, topped off with my wedding ring. Carol would get the message. I stacked all the photos of her and Eric's kid on the dining table and hammered a nail through them, shattering the glass. Then I was done. I drove my packed Volvo to a hotel across town, unloaded it, and went to the airport. After renting a car, I picked up Sam's car, put it in storage, and began setting up my new life. I didn't want to be found, so I stayed out of sight, eating pizza and drinking beer in my hotel room. While I hid, I moved all my personal funds, closed joint credit cards, and took the money. I emptied Sam's college fund, which I'd saved for him, and left him with nothing. He'd have to ask Eric for that now. That night, it took some effort to sleep. I kept thinking about the good times with my family. But the truth hit. They never cared about me. So why should I care about them? I shifted from Clueless Joe to Fearsome Joe. Tomorrow, Fearsome Joe would hit Tyndall Manufacturing. I parked a little distance from the office, not wanting to be noticed, and broke into the building. As CFO, I had full access to the company's accounts. I moved all the money into the main account, leaving just enough for 2 payrolls. I maxed out the credit line and transferred everything to our Cayman Islands account. I changed all the login details so no one could access anything. I even updated the address to a fake one, cut off utilities, and made sure everything was set up to be untraceable. I laughed to myself as I finished. The Tyndall men had always kept every business record. But now everything was in the cloud, and I was the only one who could change anything. I had them exactly where I wanted them. I changed all the passwords and login details, locking everyone out of the accounts and machines. Eric's computer was next. I copied files, videos of him with staff, local wives, and, of course, Carol, onto a thumb drive. I didn't mess with his computer, saving this for later. The utility room was my final stop. It wasn't just a utility room. It was a fortress. The main power line entered here, and the room was secured. The only people with access were the electrician and me. I turned off the power and added new locks. By the time they figured out the problem, the power company would shut off the supply. The keys to the building and everything else were soaked in cleaning fluid to erase any trace of ownership. Walking out of the building that had been my life's work felt strange. I had always dreamed of running the company, but those dreams had turned into nightmares. Eric partied with his buddies while I worked to build the business. My family's texts and emails were all the same. "We love you, we're sorry, please talk to us." But I was done. My mother begged for forgiveness, asking me to make things work with Carol and Sam. But the number 17 kept coming to mind. 17 years of Carol betraying me with him. My whole world had crumbled, and I was ready to move on. I called my lawyer, Bob Carson, and scheduled a meeting for Tuesday afternoon. I gathered the documents I needed and planned my attack. I wanted to file for divorce on grounds of infidelity, but doubted Carol would agree to move to another state for that. I also didn't want to pay child support, but was okay with splitting everything 50-50ths. Tyndall's stock wasn't an option, as I didn't own any. Carol's salary was close to mine, so Bob thought the divorce could be quick unless she fought it. We'd serve her papers at her school. Time to make her feel the shame she'd put me through. At the meeting, I also mentioned rearranging Tyndall's funds. As CFO, I had authorization to move money, but Bob warned me it could lead to a lawsuit if it caused Tyndall any loss. I didn't care. They'd have to spend a fortune to sue me, and I was ready to air all their dirty laundry in court if it came to that. Bob mentioned a $3,000 retainer for any future work. I quickly scheduled meetings with 3 companies that wanted my services and access to my patents. There was no reason to stay in town anymore. I had friends who could help, but I didn't want to burden them. My only option now was to fight my way up, start over, and leave this mess behind at 43 with nothing but a new chance ahead. A week later, Bob Carson called. "Joe, I just got back from the county attorney's office. Edward's demanding your arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand theft." Bob explained to the county attorney and Edward that all the funds were in a Tyndall account that had been active for years. "The money still belongs to the company. Nothing's been withdrawn. Edward just needs to arrange for a new signer on the account." I knew this would force Edward to fly to the Caymans, a trip he hated, especially over water. A month after Carol was served divorce papers, my lawyer called to ask if I'd responded to her calls. I laughed. Of course not. No calls, texts, emails, or letters. The divorce was stalled because Carol was fighting over Sam's college fund and the car. Even my lawyer thought it'd be tough to get those past the judge. I told him I'd agree to split the college fund. If she doesn't like that, I'll sue for fraud. I've paid for Sam's expenses for 16 years believing I was his father. I'll sue Carol, Eric, Sally, and Edward. I might not win, but the media would have a field day with Tyndall's dirty laundry. A week later, my lawyer called again. Carol was willing to sign the papers if I met with her for an hour. She wanted to explain her actions. I didn't care to see or talk to her, but I agreed. I needed to wrap up everything legally and be done with her and anyone named Tyndall. Under the condition, it was just the 2 of us. I also insisted on recording the meeting to ensure I wasn't trapped or comatose. It might sound paranoid, but after 17 years of being clueless, I wasn't taking any chances. At 3 p.m. the next week, I backed my rental car into my old driveway. Seeing no suspicious cars, I walked to the door, which opened as if she'd been waiting for me. No fancy dress, no special dinner, just 2 stacks of papers to finalize our divorce. The marriage had already ended emotionally. The paperwork was just the final step. She offered a drink, but I declined. I didn't care how she was. Instead, I said, "You got me here. Go ahead, start." For the next 15 minutes, I listened to Carol repeat the same tired script. The cheater's apology, word for word. Nothing new. I tried to keep track of how many "I'm sorries" and "can we work this out" she threw at me. But her words were starting to bore me. She even went so far as to quote the family history, mentioning how Edward had forgiven my mother, using the bolded letters I'd written. The numbers were clear. Once a year for 17 years, 24 times each year, adding up to 408 times on her envelope. "It wasn't that many times, Joe," Carol said. "Okay, show me the math. How many times?" I shot back. In a small, shaky voice, she murmured, "Too many." There was no anger on my face, just a complete lack of emotion. When she saw my disinterest, she changed her approach. "Do you want to ask me any questions?" she asked, her voice softening. I met her gaze and asked, "Why?" After a heavy sigh, Carol began. "You know I was pressured into having a child with Eric's prostatic fluid. Your dad." "Oh, sorry," I muttered. Edward really wanted that Tyndall bloodline to continue. He was worried that any woman Eric knocked up wouldn't be good enough to carry the family name. Even when I was trying to get pregnant with Sam, I still slept with you, hoping you'd be the one to get me pregnant. I really wanted to have your baby and be a family, but I screwed that up. The urge to call her the same floozy name Edward hated was tempting, but I resisted. I let her stew in her own words for a moment before responding. "I don't agree with your conclusion, Carol. I've heard that excuse enough times to be disgusted by the idea of Eric's baby being some bond in our family." Carol shook her head, a defensive edge creeping back into her tone. "So was keeping up the affair with Eric while pregnant your way of holding our family together? Was it that enjoyable, humiliating me in secret?" "No, Joe. It had nothing to do with you," she said, her voice softer now. "Nonsense," I retorted. "It had everything to do with me. I was your husband. You promised not to sleep with anyone else, least of all my brother. What the hell made you think it was okay to sleep with other people? That it didn't matter as long as I didn't find out?" "I'm sorry, I misspoke, Joe," she corrected herself quickly. "What I meant was, it was more about me than you. When I chose to get pregnant with Eric, I realized he wasn't nearly as good a lover as you. He was selfish, all about his own needs, not mine. I couldn't wait for him to stop. I hated the way he made me feel, sweaty, dirty, uncomfortable. After I got pregnant, I stopped seeing him. From then on, all my love was for you because you cared about me and made me feel good." "Which you did," I responded flatly. "After being with him, I appreciated how you treated me, both in and out of the bedroom," she continued. "So you went back to him because I was too good of a lover?" I asked, incredulous. "That's ridiculous," she said, shaking her head in frustration. "This may sound awful," I started. "Yeah, the whole Eric thing sounds pretty awful," she interrupted. "Let's just get on with this sad, sad story about how you had to screw the big bad man who didn't please you," I said, a bitter edge in my voice. "Please, Joe, I only have an hour left to talk to you. I still love you, but I know I've ruined my chances with you. I just want to convince you that what I did had nothing to do with our relationship. You were the best husband I could have asked for, but I have a flaw. I've been successful in life, and sometimes that makes me think I'm smarter or better than others. I lose sight of my compassion and act arrogantly. I needed someone to treat me harshly, and Eric fit that role. This flaw came out when your parents pushed me into having Eric's baby instead of yours." "You mean when you were treated like a farm animal?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "I suppose that's one way to put it. There was no love involved. We undressed, had sex, and I left. No cuddling, no kissing. Afterward, I liked the sex, but not the loving kind we had. It was about his rough passion, his big tool hitting me hard, pulling my hair, no emotional connection. Afterward, there was nothing. No affection, no promises, no plans. Just rough sex when I needed it. Sometimes twice a month, sometimes not for months. Eric didn't care about frequency. The bottom line is, Joe, I went back to him because I needed that humiliation. I needed something to keep me grounded, to stop feeling so superior. It wasn't because you were a bad lover. You were tender, loving, and treated me like a queen. But I used Eric to fix my superiority complex. Looking back, I see I made a huge mistake, and I'm sorry. I hurt the best man I've ever known. I hope that someday, when all this is behind us, you'll remember the good times we had." "That's a pretty far-fetched story," I said, skeptical. "At least I know most of the facts." "Or do I?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She replied quietly, "Yes, you know all the facts now." "Do I really? Let's see what I don't know. When was the last time he slept with you?" "The last time I saw him was when I kicked him in the kidneys after that awful day at your parents' house." "I assume he didn't use a rubber?" I pressed. She shook her head, confirming my suspicion. "Did you ever think Eric's Magic Johnson could give you an STD?" I asked, my voice harsh. She only shrugged. "Did we ever have sex on the same day you slept with Eric?" I asked, watching her face pale. "I always douched afterward and again at home," she responded, but the answer didn't settle my question. "That didn't answer my question. How many times, Carol?" I pressed again. "Not many, Joe. But there were times you really wanted to make love and I hated turning you away. I told you I'd rather give you head and that you didn't need to go down on me. Now that we've danced around the issue, let's get to the truth. Did you ever give me sloppy seconds? I asked, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. She hesitated. I didn't keep track of that. I didn't want to do that to you, but yeah, there were probably times when it happened. I can't give you an exact number, but it probably did. The lasagna I had for lunch at Mama Anna's Ristorante was now boiling in my stomach, like the lava of an empty Vesuvius. The thought that I had sloppy seconds pushed me to the edge. Just like the volcano, the hot lava erupted from my mouth in a full-blown projectile vomit. Suddenly, the table and Carol were covered in the remnants of my previous meal. I stumbled toward the door, leaving a trail of small chunks of meat and pasta behind. Carol's sobs echoed in my ears. Guess she didn't appreciate having puke on her carpet and dress. Too bad my attorney had to redo the paperwork because no one at the courthouse would touch it. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized, with me getting half of the college fund and car proceeds. Carol keeps the house until scumsucker Sam finishes high school. I'm sure he was pissed, but since he didn't want me in his life anymore, I took my money and left. Since I didn't father that ungrateful kid, I refused to pay child support. If the court demanded it, I'd change the filing to infidelity and sue all the Tindalls for fraud. No one wanted that kind of shame. Hell, I was already ashamed to be a Tindall. During my self-imposed exile, I was torn about whether to watch the video files I'd downloaded from Eric's office. I was still struggling to process Carol's betrayal, let alone be calm enough to watch two people I hated having sex. Each file was named, and when I saw the name Sindra on a relatively small file, a chill ran down my spine. Sindra was the wife of one of my best friends, John Brown. John was 2 years ahead of me in high school, but we barely spoke back then. He was a jock, I was a nerd. But this nerd helped the jock pass his English class. John excelled in science and math, but struggled with English. Over the semester, we became friends, and after he left for a small college on a football scholarship, we lost touch. When he came back to town after graduation to be near his aging parents, he asked me about work. I was happy to see that his skills lined up with what we needed in the shop. I recommended him for a job, and we picked up our friendship where we left off. A couple of years ago, John and Sindra hit a rough patch. From what I heard, Sindra had gone out for a girls' night and either got comatose or drank too much. Somehow she ended up sleeping with some guy. Ashamed, she told John as soon as she got home, but by then the damage was done. They had 2 young kids, and a divorce would have been disastrous. The Sindra video file was the smallest, and it started with her stumbling into a hotel room. It was clear someone had set up a phone camera on the dresser. She walked like a zombie, staring at the king-size bed. Eric walked into the frame and undressed the disoriented Sindra. At first I thought there was no audio, but soon realized it was because there was no talking. I'd always been impressed by Sindra in a bikini at the lake, but seeing her without clothes left me breathless. I could understand why John didn't want to lose her. I watched the video of Eric and Sindra, and it was disturbing. Eric treated her with complete indifference, showing no regard for her as a person. Just a cold, detached interaction that left no doubt about how little he cared. Afterward, he grabbed a drink from the mini-fridge and lit a cigarette. Sindra shuffled to the bathroom, cleaned herself up, got dressed, and left. No words, just a cold encounter. John had always wondered what happened that night, but now I had the evidence if he ever wanted revenge. I invited him over to my apartment to talk. After a couple of beers, he asked what the top-secret conversation was about. Unbeknownst to you, John, I came across a video of your wife having sex with another guy, I said. It looks like she was either comatose, drunk, or both. I can tell you who it was, show you the video, or both. Which one would hurt the least? It took John a while to compose himself. Tears welled up in his eyes, and his breaths grew deeper. I placed my hand on his shoulder, but stayed silent. Who was it? He finally asked. Brother Eric, I replied. But she can't stand him, thinks he's an idiot. Why would she sleep with Eric? John's voice was full of disbelief. As I said, John, she looked out of it. I'll show you the video so you can see for yourself. She wasn't the one making the moves. After watching the video, John's face fell. He now knew the truth. His wife had no idea who the man was and couldn't explain why they had sex. She cried uncontrollably as she confessed everything to him. Why would he screw an employee's wife like this? John asked, trying to stay calm but clearly struggling. It was a one-time thing, and he never contacted her again, she explained, her voice trembling with guilt. My guess, John, is that he didn't even know her last name. He probably comatosed the most attractive woman in the room and went for it. He didn't care about her name, just her body. I added, my tone blunt. John stood up and wiped his eyes. Thanks, Joe. Surprisingly, this helps. I'm glad I forgave her before because she was so upset and sorry, but now I know the facts. I'm not sure if I'll tell Sindra, though. I'll have to play it by ear. Can I have this video, Joe? He asked, his voice calmer now. Of course. I think it's the only copy, I said. John hesitated for a moment, then looked at me with a wry smile. Would you be upset if your brother had a few accidents in the next few months? Be my guest, I replied with a shrug. It works in my favor, too. I already kicked his nuts once, so I'll be the prime suspect. Just let me know when, so I can have my alibi ready. Thanks, Joe. You're like a brother to me. Yeah, and you're a way better brother than I ever had. We hugged, and as he left, he called over his shoulder, Keep in touch. I didn't spend much time going over the videos of Carol and Eric. It just wasn't worth it. The thought of it messed with my mind too much. Eventually, I decided to delete all the videos with Carol's name on them. I didn't want to see those two ever again. But as I was erasing the files, fate stepped in and I accidentally hit play instead of delete. When I accidentally played one of the videos of Carol and Eric, I saw enough to confirm what I already suspected. Carol appeared fully engaged in the situation, with no signs of hesitation, and it was clear she was complicit in what was happening. She wasn't lying when she said that with Eric, her husband, family, and friends all disappeared from her mind. Of course, she barked like the witch she was. The woman I had once loved and dreamed of was now humiliating herself like this, and it hit me hard. That moment wiped away every good memory I had of her. 2 weeks later, John came over for a beer to thank me for answering some awful questions that had haunted him for years. He also thanked me for showing him that Sindra had been sexually attacked, not cheating. He had an idea to use the remaining recordings to expose cheating wives and help husbands devastated by Eric's actions. I gladly handed over the rest of the disgusting videos to him. Meanwhile, my job search was progressing. One of Tyndall's main competitors reached out and asked me to come for an interview in their city. It was the first glimpse of happiness I'd felt in a while. I made myself available at any time they wanted to meet. The Donan Corporation, led by CEO Tim Donan, offered me an attractive employment package. The only catch was that I had to meet with the head of Reynolds Resources for a personality evaluation. After everything I'd been through in the past few months, I worried about what they might find wrong with me. The person I was supposed to meet the next morning at 10 was Mickey D. Reynolds, the owner. Reynolds Resources did more than just personality evaluations. They handled HR duties, employee recruitment, corporate governance, and reporting for Donan Manufacturing. Tim had said it took a load off his mind, as he was more of a hands-on engineer than someone who enjoyed paperwork. The office was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to Donan's more utilitarian setup. After giving the receptionist my name, I was offered coffee and a seat on the couch while Mickey D. was getting ready to see me. "No, Mr. Reynolds, it's Mickey D.," she said with a smile. To my surprise, Mickey D. was actually Mickey D. She was an attractive woman, probably in her early 30s. She wasn't fazed when I stumbled over my words as we shook hands. She gave me a firm yet feminine grip that I found pleasing. For the next couple of hours, we discussed my traits, preferences, and my approach to engineering. Our conversation was polite and pleasant. She subtly asked why I was leaving Tyndall. She knew it wasn't appropriate to ask personal questions, but gave me the space to share if I wanted. I was passed over for president and underpaid for the work I was doing, I told her. "Oh gosh, Joe, it's already 11:45. I bet you're ready for lunch. I'll send my report to Tim and he'll be in touch with more details. Would it be against company policy if I took you out to lunch? Like a new employee tour?" she asked with a sly grin. "I'd love to do that," I replied. And so we went out for the first of many lunches, which turned into dinners and more over the next few months. I was slow to jump into a relationship, but I was eager to spend time with her. I really enjoyed her company. From her reaction, she seemed happy with the pace and the development of our friendship. During this time, Tyndall Manufacturing was struggling financially. Even though they had the cash to pay the bills, the money just wasn't available. Edward had to act fast, as vendors and suppliers needed to be paid. He had to dip into his emergency assets to keep the company afloat. The 160 acres of prime land close to town were worth millions, but the thought of mortgaging it sent a chill through the Tyndalls, who had owned the property for over a century. They used the mortgage funds to keep things running until Edward went to the Caymans to gain control of the money. Unfortunately, the damage to their reputation was severe. Suppliers who used to allow 14-day credit terms now demanded cash up front. This severely hurt their working capital, and the mortgage wasn't paid off when the money from the Caymans finally made it back to the States. As time passed, Mickey D learned the details of the explosion in my personal and professional life. She was understanding, as her world had exploded too. 2 years ago, a UPS truck had run over and eliminated her husband, the founder and driving force behind Reynolds Resources. After his end of life, she had worked tirelessly to keep the business afloat. Meanwhile, John told me that someone attacked Eric in a dark bar parking lot. Eric had taken several blows from a steel pipe. Lying on the ground, he begged for mercy, reaching up with his right hand. The attacker grabbed Eric's middle finger and bent it back until he heard it snap. After a shriek of pain, Eric passed out, missing the admonition from his attacker. That's for sticking your finger in my wife. My job at Donen brought much-needed happiness into my life. I settled in quickly, and since I didn't have a non-compete clause with Tyndall, I started poaching their best customers. They knew I had left the company and were happy to hear from me. I wasn't the salesman Eric had been, but I knew what the customers needed and how to produce it better, faster, and cheaper than Tyndall. Eric, on the other hand, knew little about our products. He just knew they had to be paid for. He wasn't out calling on customers much, as he kept getting hurt, usually after leaving a bar. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my relationship with Mickey D was fantastic. In addition to being beautiful, loving, smart, and caring, she was a lot of fun to be with. After many dates and growing closer, our evenings became more intimate. Not rough, but full of touching, kissing, and rubbing. One night, it became clear that Mickey was acting as though she wanted to be in bed with me. After dancing a bit closer than usual, she picked up on my sexual interest. As her leg brushed against mine, she looked up with those stunning eyes and asked, "Shall we leave now?" "Absolutely," I replied. Then I kissed her with more passion than I ever had before. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. On the way home, things almost got out of control, but when endorphins are flowing, how could we stop? It wasn't a wild, shirt-ripping contest, just slow, deliberate undressing in her bedroom, both of us exploring unfamiliar territory. Our breathing quickened, heart rates rose. Then, as we paused, she whispered in my ear, "Did you bring protection?" "No," I replied. "I'm sterile. That's why Carol had Eric's baby." "What did the doctor say about being sterile?" "No doctor. My mom told me I had the mumps as a kid, and that's why I couldn't get Carol pregnant." "The same mother who lied to you about your father and encouraged your wife to sleep with your brother? If I were you, I wouldn't believe a word she says. You need a real doctor's opinion." She paused. "Now, let's have some amazing Zex." By morning, we'd had Zex at least 4 times, and I believed Mickey had probably quadrupled that number. After we'd both exhausted our sexual energy, the topic of my fertility came up. I promised to see a fertility specialist and get my prostatic fluid tested. Of course, I'd have to wait a week until my body recovered. Anything close to the prostatic fluid count I produced that weekend should be fine. After an awkward visit to the doctor's office for the prostatic fluid test, I was told to return in a week for the results. Since Mickey was curious, I asked her to come with me to the doctor's appointment. The doctor didn't take long to inform us that I wasn't infertile. My prostatic fluid count was 25 million, which was lower than average, but not alarmingly so. The normal range is between 50 and 100 million. The mobility of my prostatic fluid was also within the average range. The doctor reassured us that unless we were trying to conceive immediately, there was no reason to worry. He suggested I take some vitamins and avoid excessive drinking, as that might help. His best advice? The best way to get pregnant is not to try too hard. It's a bit like roulette. Your prostatic fluid just needs to meet the egg. With my lower prostatic fluid count, the odds were slim, but not impossible. Mickey D went back on birth control, and I used a rubber. For a couple of months, we decided it was best to wait until after the new year to think about moving in together. But first, she wanted me to meet her parents. She'd told them she was dating a great guy, and they were eager to meet me. I was a little nervous as we drove up to a large but unassuming house. As soon as the door opened, Mickey D stepped in front of me and hugged a man in gray slacks and a red Christmas sweater. She turned slightly to the right and said, "Daddy, I want you to meet the man I love, Joe Tyndall." "Joe, meet my father." I interrupted, saying, "Mr. Donen." "Oops," I said. "Tim, I didn't know you were her father." "Wow, I don't know what to say." "Just say nice to see you, Tim, and come on inside," Tim said. "Why didn't you tell me Tim was your father? Don't you think that would have been something I'd be interested in?" Yes, Joe, Mickey answered. And that's why we didn't want you to know. We wanted to see if you were interested in me or my inheritance. Plus, we didn't want you to take heat from the employees for dating the boss's daughter and only heir to the company. Like me, I had a younger brother, but he died when he was 16. So, what does being invited to Christmas dinner with your parents mean for me? I asked. Does it change our relationship? Joe, it means I love you and want you to meet my family. Business is separate. Since you've told me you have no family, I'm asking you to spend Christmas with mine. Okay, now I get it about Mickey D. The D is for Donan, I said. I really am clueless, aren't I? She giggled and replied, maybe you should have a D in your name for duh. We all laughed, and the tension eased. We had a wonderful afternoon and evening. I genuinely enjoyed spending time with Tim and Mickey's mother, Barbara. Although I was a bit clueless, I got the sense that my request for Mickey's hand in marriage would be met with approval from her parents. I was pretty sure Mickey would say yes, but after everything I'd been through, I didn't want to take anything for granted. My instinct proved right. 3 months later, when I went down on one knee with a blue velvet box in my hand, Mickey jumped off the couch and into my arms. She kissed me passionately, then pulled back just long enough to pant, yes, yes, yes. Then she returned to kissing me as if her life depended on it. Not that I minded her enthusiasm. 3 months after Mickey and I got married, we had a small private wedding. There were no guests from my side of the family, just John, Sindra, and a few new friends. After a relaxing honeymoon in the Caribbean, we returned to my apartment and started our new life together. The first thing we did was decide it was time for Mickey to stop taking her birth control pills. We figured it might take a while for us to conceive, so we were in no rush. We also went to the county courthouse to change our names. Mickey decided to return to her maiden name, Mickey Donan, and I followed suit, changing my name to Joseph Timothy Donan. We felt it was the right move for us both. When we asked Tim for his blessing, he was touched. With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "Thank you, son," which meant a lot to me. Meanwhile, John had found a video of Carol and Eric together, one of the many from their affair, and determined to get some revenge for both of us. He sent copies to several junior and senior boys at the school where Carol worked. The video was titled, Principal Screwing Class 101. A week later, Carol was walking down the hallway at school when she began hearing barking sounds. At first, she thought it was some kind of strange coincidence, but the barking continued, coming from groups of boys in the hallways. When she stepped into the office, it stopped, only to start up again as soon as she left. After the video of Carol and Eric spread, the students at her school began mocking her in the most humiliating ways. Their disruptive behavior, like making barking noises, was relentless, and it completely destroyed her credibility and respect among the staff and students. At first, she tried to ignore it, but as the noise followed her everywhere, she became more and more uncomfortable. The barking grew louder as she walked across the school grounds the next morning, and she quickly realized that someone had spread the video of her and Eric. It was a humiliation she wasn't prepared for. After a tense encounter with Eric at his office, where she demanded to know if he had leaked the video, he claimed he hadn't, saying the video had been hacked and gone viral. But Carol knew the damage was done. Her reputation, her career, and her dignity were on the line. She tried to push through the day, but it was clear that her professional life was unraveling. She bolted from her office and ran home to lick her wounds. The next day, she went back to work, but the damage was beyond repair. The boys at school continued to mock her, and she eventually lost all credibility with the staff, students, and the school board.
Welcome to another story of Cheating Tales Lab. We're grateful for every single one of you who's joined us today. We've got an interesting story that we hope will keep you hooked. Let's start. The Chicago Fire Department's Tactical Rescue Unit had just completed a grueling 24-hour shift. Roderick Conway's muscles ached from rappelling down a 12-story building to save a maintenance worker trapped on a malfunctioning window washing platform. But the satisfaction of a successful rescue made the exhaustion worthwhile. Hell of a save today, Conway. Captain Reynolds clapped his shoulder. Take tomorrow off. You've earned it. Rod hadn't planned to be home on a Tuesday afternoon. His wife Candace had her usual intense training session scheduled. something she never shut up about lately. The house felt unusually quiet as he dropped his gear bag by the door. A notification chimed from the kitchen counter. Candace's iPad lit up, displaying a message preview that stopped Rod's breath cold. "My husband's too small to satisfy me. Can't wait for our private session." The sender's name glowed accusingly. Zach Grimes, her personal trainer. Rod stood motionless, years of crisis response training keeping his hands steady as he picked up the tablet. They shared an Apple ID, Candace's idea 6 months ago, claiming it would help them stay connected during his long shifts. The irony twisted in his gut like a knife. More messages popped up in rapid succession. "You're so tight from our last workout. Need another deep tissue massage? That new pose you showed me in the private training room. Can't stop thinking about it. Your husband's probably sleeping while we're getting hot and sweaty." Rod's jaw clenched. All those nights Candace had mocked his old man bedtime, knowing full well his rescue shifts left him exhausted. He defended her to his team when she missed awards ceremonies and department functions, claiming she was dedicated to her fitness goals. His phone buzzed, his brother Marshall's name lighting up the screen. "Rod, got a minute? It's about Mom's medical bills." Rod moved to his home office, closing the door quietly. "What's wrong?" "The specialist wants to try a new treatment protocol. Insurance is fighting it." Marshall's voice carried the weight of concern. "Have you talked to Candace about helping? I know you mentioned she'd promised." "She's been busy with competition prep." The words tasted bitter now. Rod had been covering their mother's mounting expenses alone, despite Candace's repeated promises to contribute from her fitness business income. "That's got to be going well at least," Marshall said carefully. "Mom mentioned seeing her post with that trainer." "Zach something?" "Grimes." Rod's voice remained neutral through years of practice handling crisis situations. "I should check our accounts, see what we can do for Mom." After hanging up, Rod logged into their joint banking portal. The truth hit harder than any backdraft he'd ever faced. Their savings account, decimated. His inheritance from Dad, specifically set aside for Mom's treatment, had been systematically drained through transfers to Personal Training Solutions LLC, Zach's private company. Thousands of dollars, gone without discussion or consent. Rod downloaded the statements, noting the pattern. The transfers increased as Candace spent more time at the gym, coinciding with her sudden interest in fitness competition. His phone buzzed again. Willard James, his closest friend on the rescue team. "Can you swing by the station? Need your eyes on something." 20 minutes later, Rod sat in Will's truck in the station parking lot, watching his friend struggle to find words. "Look, brother, there's no easy way. We'll grip the steering wheel. Bridget's been keeping something from me, about Candace." Rod waited, letting years of tactical patience guide his response. "They work out at the same time slot," Will continued. "Her and Zach. Bridget says. They're not exactly subtle. Tell me, the girls' nights twice a week? They're cover for meetings at his private studio." Will couldn't meet his eyes. "Everyone at the station knows. We didn't know how to tell you." Rod absorbed this, remembering all the times Candace had rushed out dressed to kill, claiming female bonding time with Bridget and the other firefighters' wives. How long? At least 6 months. Since she started serious training for competition. Will finally looked at him. "What are you going to do?" Rod's expression remained composed, but his eyes held the same focus his team recognized from their most dangerous rescues. "First, I'm going to make a call." Jillian Martinez answered on the second ring. Rod had pulled her from a high-rise fire 2 years ago, rappelling down 60 stories with her clinging to his back after her office's stairwell collapsed. Roderick Conway. Her voice warmed with recognition. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Need your professional services, Jill. The discreet kind." As a private investigator specializing in infidelity cases, Jillian worked quickly. Within days, she'd uncovered Zach's pattern, seducing wealthy clients' wives, recording encounters for potential blackmail. 3 divorces in the past 2 years had ended with quiet settlements after the husbands received anonymous video clips. "He's smart," Jillian reported, showing Rod surveillance photos. "Private training room has hidden cameras. Gets them hooked on steroids, creates dependency. When they're in deep, he suggests recording their progress for motivation." Any of the videos surface publicly? Never. He keeps them as insurance, threatens to send them to family members or employers if the women don't pay up after their husbands find out. Rod studied the photos, Zach leading Candace into his private studio, his hand inappropriately low on her back. Timestamps showed late-night sessions when Rod was supposed to be on shift. He's never faced someone like you, though, Jillian added. Most of his target's husbands are executives, desk jockeys, not tactical rescue specialists who rappel down burning buildings for a living. Rod's smile didn't reach his eyes. What's his usual rate for these private sessions? $500 an hour, off the books. Why? Because we're going to make him an offer he can't refuse. The next day, an anonymous email reached Zach's private account, double his rate for comprehensive documentation of sessions with Candace Conway. Every video, every text, every encounter. Zach's response came within minutes. When do we start? Rod closed his laptop, his tactical mind already mapping out the next phases. Like any rescue operation, timing and precision would be everything. In their bedroom, Candace's competition bikinis hung like trophies, price tags still attached. On her nightstand, a framed photo from their wedding day showed a different woman, softer, genuine, looking at Rod with real love. He placed the frame face down. His phone chimed with a text from Marshall. Mom's insurance denied the treatment. Need to talk options. Rod typed back, I'll handle it. You focus on the investigation. Another message popped up, Jillian confirming Zach had taken the bait. Everything was falling into place. Like the fires he fought, Rod knew this situation would get hotter before it was contained. But he'd never backed down from a blaze, and he wasn't about to start now. The next morning, he left for his shift as usual. Candace barely looked up from her protein shake and Instagram posts. Don't wait up, she called out. Got a late training session. Wouldn't dream of it, Rod replied, his voice neutral. Let her think he was still the trusting husband, too exhausted from saving lives to notice her betrayal. Soon enough, she'd learn what his rescue team already knew. Roderick Conway never left anyone behind in a fire, but he also never forgot who started the blaze. The emergency alert pierced through Chicago's summer heat at 3 a.m. A massive forest fire threatened the western county line, already consuming thousands of acres. Rod Conway's tactical rescue team deployed immediately, their heavy gear offering little protection against the inferno's intensity. Team 1, take the North Quadrant, Rod commanded through his radio. Priority is the residential evacuation. Team 2, establish the fire break at Marker 7. Smoke turned the dawn sky apocalyptic orange. Rod coordinated with multiple agencies, directing helicopters and ground teams while personally leading the most dangerous rescues. A family trapped in a remote cabin. An elderly couple refusing to leave their home of 50 years. Each successful evacuation strengthened his team's resolve. His phone buzzed, Candace's familiar ringtone. Rod ignored it, focusing on the crisis map spread across his mobile command center. Sir, a young firefighter approached. Your wife keeps calling the station. Says it's urgent. Rod checked his messages. Where are you? My post-routine assessment is today. You promised to film my progress. This fire better be worth missing my competition prep. The last message made his jaw clench. He typed back, evacuating families. Try to contain your disappointment. Hours later, covered in soot and sweat, Rod received another call, this one from his mother's doctor. Mr. Conway, we need to discuss treatment options. The standard protocol isn't working, but there's an experimental program showing promising results. What's the cost? Insurance won't cover it. We're looking at roughly $60,000. Rod thought of the inheritance money Candace had drained for her training. I'll figure it out, Doc. Just save the spot. When he finally returned home 30 hours later, Candace was preening in front of their bedroom mirror, admiring her competition spray tan. You missed everything, she snapped. Zach says my poses lack confidence because my husband can't bother supporting me. Supporting you? Rod's voice carried the smoke of 100 burning acres. Like you're supporting Mom's treatment? Oh God, not this again. Candace rolled her eyes. Your mother's illness is just an excuse to hold me back. You're jealous because I'm finally doing something for myself. Doing someone, you mean? Her face flickered with momentary panic before settling into practiced indignation. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Rod headed for the shower. Enjoy your night at the gym. She didn't come home that night. Rod sat in his home office, laptop open to an email from Zach. The subject line read, Training Documentation, Session 1. The video played in stark high definition. Candace and Zach in the private training room, her wedding ring glinting under fluorescent lights as she wrapped herself around her trainer. Their conversation burned worse than any fire. Your husband's probably out playing hero again. Zach's voice dripped contempt. Please, Candace laughed. He can barely satisfy me in bed. You're twice the man he is. Rod closed the laptop, his tactical mind already processing this new intelligence. The next morning brought fresh ammunition. You won't believe this, Candace announced over breakfast, practically vibrating with excitement. I qualified for my first competition. We're having my birthday party here next weekend. A little victory celebration. Your birthday's not for 3 weeks. So? The timing's perfect. I've invited everyone from the gym. She scrolled through her phone. Bridget's handling the guest list. You don't mind funding it, right? Since you missed all my prep sessions. Rod studied his wife's enhanced features, noting the subtle signs of steroid use Jillian had warned him about. Whatever makes you happy, honey. The week that followed tested every ounce of Rod's tactical patience. His team received a commendation for their handling of the forest fire, a ceremony Candace skipped, claiming she needed to finalize party details. That night, another email from Zach arrived. More footage, more explicit than the last. But it was the attached text messages that sealed their fate. Candace, after I win the competition, I'm leaving him. Zach, about time, baby. What about the house? Candace, prenup only kicks in after 5 years. 2 more months and half of everything is mine. Rod forwarded everything to his lawyer, then called Marshall. Need a favor, brother. Background check on everyone attending this party. The results painted an interesting picture. Most of the guest list consisted of Zach's previous clients, wives who'd fallen for his routine. Bridget, Lorraine, others who smirked behind their husbands' backs while enabling Candace's affair. But the most disturbing revelation came from Marshall himself. During their usual Sunday family dinner, he pulled Rod aside. There's something you need to see. Marshall handed over his phone. She tried this last month. I shut it down, but the messages made Rod's blood boil. Your brother doesn't have to know. What happens in the family stays in the family. Winky face. You're the better Conway anyway. She said I wouldn't mind keeping it in the family. Marshall's disgust was palpable. I wanted to tell you sooner, but she threatened to tell Karen about that case we worked undercover. Rod placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. You're telling me now. That's what matters. At the gym, Candace and Zach had grown bolder. They barely tried hiding their relationship, confident in Rod's perceived weakness. During her training sessions, they openly discussed their future plans, thinking no one would dare tell the pathetic husband. But Rod wasn't idle. Each day brought new evidence, meticulously organized and documented. His mother's successful response to the experimental treatment, which he'd funded by selling his prized motorcycle, gave him the final push needed for what came next. The day before the party, Rod visited the station. Need some AV help tomorrow, he told his team. Consider it a training exercise in exposure and containment. Will studied his friend's expression. You sure about this? Some fires need to burn, Rod replied. Just be ready with the metaphorical hoses. He spent that night in his office, finalizing preparations. Candace's laughter drifted up from the kitchen where she planned the party layout with Bridget and the other enablers. It's perfect, he heard her say. Everyone who matters will be there to see it. Rod smiled grimly at his computer screen. She had no idea how right she was. The day of Candace's birthday party dawned bright and hot, matching the anticipation burning in Rod Conway's chest. He watched from their bedroom window as the catering van arrived, followed by Zach's polished Mercedes pulling into their driveway far too comfortably. Rod. Candace's voice carried up the stairs. The projection system guys are here. Make yourself useful and show them where to set up. He smiled, knowing she'd interpret it as submission rather than satisfaction. The technical team, actually specialists from his tactical unit, began installing the birthday gift with practiced efficiency. Latest model, Rod explained as Candace breezed through. Perfect for showing those fitness videos you love so much. She barely acknowledged him, too busy texting on her phone. Her red dress left little to imagination. The same one she'd bought for competition prep according to their credit card statement. The house filled quickly with Candace's chosen audience. Gym rats in tight clothes, enabling wives who'd covered for her affairs. A few uncomfortable firefighters who'd come out of loyalty to Rod. Marshall arrived with 2 uniformed officers he introduced as friends from the precinct. Everything ready? Marshall muttered, accepting a drink. Rod nodded slightly. Jillian's outside with the full documentation. Officers have everything they need? Just waiting for your signal. Zach worked the room like he owned it, his trainer's physique on display in a shirt 2 sizes too small. He kept a calculated distance from Candace, but their glances told the story to anyone paying attention. Such a power couple, Bridget gushed to the other wives. The way he pushes her to be her best. Unlike some husbands, Lorraine added with a pointed look at Rod. He busied himself being the perfect host, taking coats, refreshing drinks, adjusting the projection system with apparent incompetence that made Candace roll her eyes. At least try not to embarrass me, she hissed, adjusting her dress. These people respect success. Oh, I know exactly what they respect, Rod replied mildly. Time for your big announcement? Candace grabbed a champagne glass, tapping it for attention. The room quieted as she took center stage, Zach hovering nearby with a proprietary smile. Thank you all for celebrating with me today, she beamed. As you know, I recently qualified for my first fitness competition. Appreciative murmurs from the crowd. I couldn't have done it without my amazing trainer, Zach. He showed me what I was capable of. The double meaning hung thick in the air. A few wives giggled. And yes, she added with false graciousness, even Rod finally made himself useful by funding my training. I guess even firefighters can support real achievement sometimes. Rod moved to the laptop, connected to the projection system. Speaking of support, he said clearly, I have a special tribute to my wife's dedication. The lights dimmed. The giant screen lit up with crisp high-definition footage from the gym's private training room. Candace smiled, expecting to see her posed routines. Her smile froze as the first intimate scene played. Then another. And another. What are you doing? She whispered, color draining from her face. The footage continued. Candace and Zach planning their future, mocking Rod, discussing how they'd spend his money after the divorce. Then came Zach's recorded confession. Sorry, babe, someone paid double to record everything. Business is business. The room had gone deathly silent. Candace stood rigid, the cake knife gripped white-knuckled in her hand. Zach made a break for the door but found Marshall and his friends blocking the way. The only thing small here is your future net worth, Rod announced, nodding to his lawyer who stepped forward with divorce papers. Happy birthday, honey. You can't prove anything, Candace sputtered. I'll say you harassed me, tracked me illegally. Actually, Jillian spoke up from the doorway. Everything was obtained legally through licensed investigation. I have sworn statements from gym employees, credit card records, bank transfers. She patted a thick folder. Plus evidence of Mr. Grimes' other extortion attempts. Zach's arrogance crumbled. Look, Conway, we can work something out. Officers, Marshall cut in. I believe you have some questions about certain controlled substances found in Mr. Grimes' private training room? The next hours passed in a blur of police statements and shocked departures. The enabling wives slunk away, their own husbands' expressions promising future conversations. Bridget couldn't meet Will's eyes as he escorted her out. 6 months later, Rod sat in his dress uniform at the Chicago Fire Department's awards ceremony. His promotion to Chief of Tactical Rescue had made headlines, partly due to his handling of the forest fire crisis, partly due to the scandal's public aftermath. His mother beamed from the front row, fully recovered thanks to the experimental treatment. Next to her sat Sophia Chun, the burn unit surgeon who'd worked with his team during the fire. Their relationship had grown slowly, naturally, built on mutual respect rather than superficial attraction. Candace's attempts at retaliation had backfired spectacularly. Her claims of harassment crumbled when Jillian presented the complete investigation. Zach, facing multiple lawsuits from other clients' husbands, had turned on her completely, providing evidence of steroid use that got her banned from competitions. The last Rod heard, she was working at a small-town gym 3 states away, her dreams of fitness fame shattered. Zach had it even worse. He'd lost his training certification and now cleaned pools for a living. His client list reduced to actual swimming pools rather than wealthy wives. The annual fundraiser for firefighters' families brought everything full circle. Rod watched Bridget and other former enablers make awkward excuses to leave early, unable to face the consequences of their choices. His mother squeezed his hand, wisdom earned through hardship evident in her eyes. Some fires need to burn, son. They clear the way for new growth. Rod looked at Sophia, who'd stood by him through the ugliest parts of the divorce, understanding his need for justice rather than simple revenge. She'd seen past the scandal to the man beneath, just as he'd seen past her professional exterior to the warmth within. Sometimes he agreed, raising his glass to their future. The smallest spark lights the biggest fire. The truth of it echoed through the gathering. Everyone who had enabled, denied, or participated in Candace's betrayal had reaped the consequences. But Rod had emerged stronger, his life rebuilt on a foundation of honesty rather than lies. In the end, that made all the difference. Epilogue 1 year later. The small-town gym in Cedar Rapids, Iowa bore little resemblance to the sleek Chicago fitness center where Candace Conway had once reigned as queen. Now simply Candace Peters again. She wiped down the basic equipment for minimum wage, her designer workout gear replaced by generic cotton uniforms. Ms. Peters, her 20-something manager, called out. The bathrooms need cleaning. She gripped the cleaning spray bottle, knuckles white. A year ago, she'd been preparing for her fitness competition debut. Now, she couldn't even get a job as a personal trainer, her certification permanently revoked after the steroid scandal. The drug test results Zach had provided showed years of sustained use, destroying any chance of appeal. Her phone, no longer the latest iPhone but a basic prepaid model, showed another rejected job application. No respectable gym would touch her. The scandal had gone viral in fitness circles, her name becoming synonymous with cautionary tales about trainer-client relationships. The 300-square-foot studio apartment she now called home was a far cry from the luxury house she'd shared with Rod. The divorce settlement had been brutal, their prenup voided by evidence of her infidelity and financial misconduct. She'd lost everything, including her carefully cultivated social media following of aspiring fitness models. Across town at the municipal pool, Zach Grimes scrubbed algae from concrete walls. The former personal trainer's muscled physique had softened, his designer stubble now just unkempt. Pool cleaning paid barely enough to cover child support for the kid he'd never known about, until one of his former clients' paternity tests hit the tabloids. "Hey, steroid man," teenagers sometimes shouted from the fence. "Want to sell us some juice?" The multiple lawsuits from other betrayed husbands had stripped him of everything. His training certification, revoked. His client list, exposed. His carefully constructed image as a professional athlete-turned-trainer, shattered by evidence of his own steroid use and dealing. His phone lit up with another threatening message from a former client's husband. They kept finding him, no matter how many times he changed his number. The videos he'd recorded for blackmail had become his own undoing. Every client, a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. Back in Chicago, Rod Conway's Tactical Rescue Unit had expanded its jurisdiction. As chief, he'd implemented new training protocols that were being adopted by departments across the country. The promotion had come with a corner office overlooking the city he protected, but he still spent most of his time in the field with his team. "Chief," his secretary announced, "Dr. Chan is here for lunch." Sophia Chin entered, her surgeon's confidence matching his own calm authority. Their relationship had grown naturally after meeting during the forest fire crisis, built on mutual respect and understanding. She'd supported him through the divorce without trying to rush his healing, earning the approval of both his team and his mother. "Ready for the fundraiser tonight?" she asked, settling into the visitor's chair. "Almost. Just waiting on final numbers from Rhonda." Rhonda Martinez, his former station administrator, had been promoted to department communications director. Her efficiency in handling media during the scandal had revealed talents wasted on basic paperwork. Marshall called, Sophia mentioned. Says Candace tried contacting your mother again. Rod's expression hardened slightly. His mother, fully recovered thanks to the experimental treatment, had received several desperate messages from his ex-wife seeking reconciliation. Each one returned unopened. "Mom's too busy enjoying her cruise," he replied. The treatment worked better than anyone expected. Across town, Willard James led a training session for new recruits. His divorce from Bridget had been quieter than Rod's public exposure, but no less final. The Enabler Wives network had crumbled, each marriage facing its own reckoning. Bridget worked as a receptionist now, her social circle reduced to other divorced enablers who gathered for wine nights to bemoan their fate. Their attempts to rewrite history, casting themselves as victims of Zach's manipulation, found little sympathy in Chicago's social circles. Jillian Martinez's private investigation firm had flourished after the case. The Conway method became her trademark, methodical documentation of infidelity combined with financial forensics. She'd hired 2 more investigators just to handle cases from Rod's firefighting community, where other wives had followed Candace's example with different trainers. The annual Firefighters Family Foundation Gala proved how much had changed. Rod and Sophia arrived to find his team and their legitimate spouses already gathered. The Enabler wives who'd once dominated these events were conspicuously absent, their husbands now accompanied by new partners or proudly attending solo. "Quite a difference," Marshall observed, joining them at the bar. His own career had advanced, the scandal's investigation leading to broader cases of fraud in the fitness industry. "Remember last year's gala?" Rod did. It had been shortly after the divorce, when Chicago society was still buzzing with details of Candace's downfall. She tried attending with her lawyer, hoping to salvage some social connections. The silent rejection had been absolute. Saw her Facebook post, Marshall continued. Still claiming she'll make a comeback once the lies are exposed. "How's that working out?" Sophia asked dryly. "About as well as Zach's new career. Guess pool cleaning doesn't have the same cachet as personal training." The latest update had Zach living in his mother's basement in Milwaukee, his attempt at opening a supplement shop shut down by multiple violations. His new social media profile listed him as a lifestyle coach, but his only followers were bots and other disgraced trainers. Candace's own attempts at reinvention had failed spectacularly. Her tell-all blog about being victimized by the fitness industry attracted only trolls sharing screenshots from Zach's videos. Her appeals for crowdfunding legal fees were flagged as fraudulent. Even her attempt to teach yoga at a senior center ended when someone recognized her from the scandal. The Enabler wives faced their own consequences. Lorraine's husband had run for local office. The scandal cost him the election. Regina's interior design business lost its high-end clients. Bridget's attempt to become a social media influencer collected more mockery than followers. "Remember that saying about karma?" We'll join their conversation. "Never thought I'd see it play out so perfectly." Rod smiled, watching Sophia chat with his mother. The elegant surgeon had no interest in fitness competitions or social media followers. Her confidence came from saving lives, her beauty enhanced by genuine compassion. Some fires, his mother had told him, burn away the dead would so new growth can flourish. The wisdom of it echoed through every aspect of his rebuilt life. His career soared higher than ever, his tactical unit's reputation drawing recruiters from across the country. His relationship with Sophia deepened naturally, their shared values creating a partnership stronger than any gym-forged attraction. Even the scandal had transformed into something positive. The Firefighters Family Foundation now included programs helping first responders identify and escape toxic relationships. Rod's story became a case study in handling betrayal with strategic precision rather than emotional reaction. The foundation's legal fund, initially created to help firefighters' families with medical bills, expanded to assist other husbands trapped in similar situations. Marshall's investigation had revealed a pattern of trainers targeting first responders' wives, taking advantage of long shifts and irregular schedules. "Chief," a young firefighter approached their group. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation developing downtown." Rod checked his phone. Multiple units responding to a high-rise fire. Sophia squeezed his hand, understanding in her eyes. "Go," she said. "I'll handle things here." As he headed out with his team, Rod reflected on how different this scene would have played out a year ago. No angry texts about missed parties. No guilt trips about choosing duty over drama. Just the clean certainty of purpose he'd always felt in his work, now extended to every aspect of his life. Later that night, after the fire was contained and the victims saved, Rod found a moment of quiet on the apparatus floor. His phone showed a missed call from an Iowa number, Candace's latest attempt at contact. He deleted it without listening to the message. On his drive home, he passed the gym where it had all started. The building stood empty now, its reputation tainted by the scandal. A for-lease sign hung where Zach's promotional posters had once attracted vulnerable clients. Sophia waited up, her surgeon's understanding of emergency calls evident in the late-night coffee and comfortable silence. No demands, no accusations, just the steady support he'd never known he was missing. "Proud of you," she said simply. Rod looked at her, seeing their future in her quiet confidence. "Some fires," he replied, echoing his mother's wisdom, "light the way forward." In Iowa, Candace stared at her unanswered call log. The small gym's mirror reflected what she'd become. A cautionary tale, a whispered warning, a testament to karma's aim. She'd played with fire, believing herself fireproof. She'd learned too late. Every fire leaves ashes, but only the strongest rise from them. And Rod Conway had emerged stronger than ever, leaving her to sweep up the remnants of her burned-out dreams.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.